This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate first part of what if Naruto fell in love with Nemu and Isane. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Always taking no more time. Let's start the story.
High above the Soul Society, the sun rose. Everybody was about their everyday lives. Protecting them from within the Seirei, the Shinigami kept watch over this spiritual realm. To form the Shinigami forces, they were divided into 13 guard squads. A year had passed since Ichigo Kurosaki lost his Shinigami abilities after defeating Sosuke Azeon in combat. Although his assistance with that incident was appreciated by all, life had resumed its usual routine. One individual was moving stealthily in the direction of Squad 12's barrack. She wore a white nagajugan underneath a short, form-fitting kimono. A white obi with a red cord was wrapped around her waist. She had silky black hair tied in a braid and piercing green eyes. This was Squad 12 Lieutenant Nemu Kuretsuchi. She was traveling to see Squad 12 Captain Mayuri Kuretsuchi, her father and creator. He had instructed her to come to the lab right away by sending her a hell butterfly. To keep her father from getting upset, she walked quickly in the hopes of arriving soon. She didn't see anyone turn the corner while she was walking, so she ran into them. Nemu was the first to look up after both of them fell hard to the ground. She turned to see it was Izan Katetsu, the lieutenant of Squad 4. Tall and silver haired, with two tiny braids on her right side. Izan had gray eyes. She was slowly rising from the ground, dressed in the typical Shinigami uniform. Izan said, "I'm sorry, Nemu," and assisted the other girl in standing. "Captain Unohana needs me as quickly as possible, and I wasn't watching where I was going." Nemu nodded as he glanced at Izan. "I understand, I too am in a hurry to see my captain." After giving a nod, Izan left. She called, "I'll see you later," and then vanished around a corner. With a sigh, Nemu turned to face the irate captain and her barracks once more. Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves, had a lovely day. The village was doing well 3 years after the Fourth Great Shinobi War ended. The land was once again at peace after they routed Madara Uchiha and his armies, but the peace was short-lived. Before long, all of the villages were engaged in combat once more. Suande Senju, the Godem Hokage, was currently dealing with this problem. She sobbed to herself as she gazed at the pile of documents in front of her. As she worked, she asked herself, "Why'd I have to do this?" It seemed to her that as soon as she finished one stack, another would appear out of nowhere. She was losing her mind. She missed her carefree drinking and gambling life, but she had to work. She nevertheless managed to sneak a peek at her hidden supply of sake in one of her desk drawers despite this. After glancing around to make sure the price was obvious, she opened the cabinet and took out a bottle. Pouring herself a glass, she grinned to herself. Tsunade spilled her sake when a huge orange and yellow blur suddenly appeared through the window. "My sake!" she exclaimed, glancing down at the drink that had spilled. She turned to face whoever had broken through her window. A tall, roughly 6 feet 2 inches man with long, spiky blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail stood in front of her. He had on a Jonin vest over a charcoal shirt. His pants were black with orange stripes running down the sides. The kanji for fox was on the back of his coat, and there were orange flames at the bottom. He had 3 whisker-like marks on his cheeks that gave him a feral appearance, and his eyes were dark blue. This was Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko and Naruto Uzumaki, the war's hero. He said, "Hi Ba-chan," with a smile. With a sigh, Tsunade turned to face her son. Across the room, she stood up and punched him. She screamed at him, "What have I told you about that? I said call me Ka-san." Saying, "Sorry Ka-san," he hobbled toward her. "I just couldn't resist." "Sure you couldn't," she reprimanded him, smiling maternally. "So what brings you here today?" "I was bored and was wondering if you had any missions I could do," Naruto said, beaming broadly. Tsunade was aware that something was wrong. Naruto requested to work. Her only options were D or C rank missions, which he would typically attempt to worm his way out of. In an attempt to elicit more information from him, she questioned, "You want to do a mission? Does it matter what rank?" "Not really," he grinned and said. Then she asked him directly, "What happened?" In an attempt to divert her attention, he asked, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You never want to do low-ranking missions," which caused him to give himself a mental slap. "So, you are either really bored, or you did something you want to get away from, and I have a feeling it's the second one." Naruto sighed as he turned to face his adoptive mother. He sighed and said, "Can't get anything past you, can I?" "Pretty much," she grinned and said, "So, spill." Naruto sighed as he turned to face her. "Well, I kind of ruined Sasuke and Sakura's date, while I was training, by accidentally destroying the restaurant they were in." She told him, that's why you're trying to get a mission, assuming he was being overly suspicious. Naruto said, this is Sakura we're talking about, as he began to grow frightened. She has been waiting to go on a date with Sasuke for years, and I ruined it. When Tsunade saw the photo, she realized he was pretty much dead. She smiled at him and began studying the mission scrolls. Let's see what we can find. Nemu entered the lab, positioned herself near the monitors, and observed her father operating a newly constructed machine. She was standing there when he turned. He approached her and gave her a slap across the face, saying, there you are, you stupid girl. You are supposed to be here as soon as I call you, is that clear? She said, yes, father, as she turned to face the floor. She detested angering him. Everything she did seemed to fall short of expectations. Mayuri's gaze shifted to his daughter. She followed him to the machine he had been using earlier. Let's get on with it, he said. Wondering what he would show her, Nemu followed. When they arrived at the machine, she saw that it was big and had a lot of tubes extending from it. It displayed a forest on a large screen. She gazed at the machine and questioned, what is this? His explanation was proud. This, my failed experiment, is a window into a world that we have never seen, he said. She exclaimed in surprise, you mean there is a world we don't know about? It was once claimed that there were only 3 worlds, but this discovery totally disproved that theory. Mayuri grinned as she observed Nemu's astonished expression. Yes, with this we can view this other world and see what has been going on. Just think of the test subjects, and other things we can learn from that world. Nemu merely watched her father babble about this discovery while nodding. She questioned whether this world was populated by humans or by something that posed a danger to the Soul Society. She whispered, have you reported this to the head captain? Mayuri said plainly, why would I report this to that buffoon? After giving it some thought, Nemu responded, he could authorize an expedition to that world, she proposed. Mayuri gave her a slap across the face after glancing at her. Why didn't you mention this earlier, you stupid girl? I'm sorry, she said, returning her attention to the floor. He said, don't think about it, you fool. Go send the message so I can get my work done. Having said, yes father, she left the room. Later, during the captain's meeting. So, I feel it would be very informative if we sent a team to this world and see what they have to offer us, Mayuri said to the other captains, hoping they would agree with the plan. Toshiro Hitsugaya, the Squad 10 captain, said, so, you're telling us, there is another world we don't know about and you want to go and explore it? Exactly, said Mayuri. Hitsugaya yelled angrily, are you out of your mind? We are still recovering from the war and you want us to waste precious manpower to visit a world that might be hostile to us. Squad 4 Captain Retsu Unohana stated, but wouldn't it be a good idea for us to learn about this world, so we can be prepared if they ever attack? It is always best to know your enemy. The captains soon got into a heated argument. While some wanted to leave this new place alone, others wanted to explore it. Everyone fell silent as head captain Yamamoto glared at the arguing captains and slammed his cane down. His words were, enough of this foolishness, I have to agree with Captain Kuretsuchi. I think it would be in the best interest of the Soul Society to learn of this new place, and to see if Hollow are there as well. Mayuri grinned and opened his mouth to say something, but the head captain interrupted him. But, we will be sending only a pair, so as not to waste any forces. They must be, at least, lieutenants. Mayuri said, I will send Nemu, as though it were the simplest response. She knows what information to gather, and she can get it quickly. Sending their lieutenants to this new world caused anxiety in many of the other captains. Mayuri was aware that they would leave if no one volunteered. Captain Unohana finally said, I will send Izan, much to the other captain's surprise. Retsu, are you sure that is wise? Squad 13 Captain Jashiro Yukitaki questioned. Yes, it is best to have a healer in the group, in case things turn hostile, Unohana said. Everyone gave a nod of agreement. Captain Yamamoto stated, so, it is settled then, in response. Lieutenants, Izan Katetsu and Nemu Kuretsuchi, will travel to this new world and gather intel on its inhabitants and Hollow activity. Dismissed. Naruto sighed as he glanced at the mission scroll. The mission was a straightforward bandit raid. He was supposed to go to a town close to the boundary of the Land of Winds, on the edge of the Land of Fire. They were struggling with a sizable gang of bandits robbing them of their food and enslaving their women. Naruto was aware that it was only a C rank. Beggars can't be choosers, but he wished she had at least a B-ranked mission. He heard a scream as he got closer to the village. He accelerated and sped in the direction of the village. He saw the bandits raiding as it came into view. He drew a 3-pronged kunai in a flash and hurled it into the center of the village. He vanished in a flash of yellow as the kunai touched down. A bandit was having a great time. He was going to capture the one girl he had his eye on since they first arrived as they were raiding the village once more. He saw a strange-looking kunai fall from the sky and hit the ground just as he was ready to enjoy himself. After a moment of staring, a flash of yellow materialized. Suddenly, he felt a cold steel blade pierce his body. A tall man with long, spiked blonde hair was standing over the young girl when she looked up. He pointed to one of the houses where she could hide and put his fingers to his mouth, telling her to keep quiet. She nodded and grinned as she hurried to the house. Before vanishing in a yellow flash, Naruto watched to make sure she was at the house. Soon, as Naruto pursued and ruthlessly killed the bandits, the sounds of their cries filled the air. Soon, there was just one bandit left. He searched everywhere but couldn't find the assailant. He yelled, "Show yourself," as his legs shook. Before long, he heard laughter. The voice said, "I am everywhere," and the bandit trembled in terror. He stumbled, "Iya. I'm not scared of you," but then he heard the laughter once more. As he felt a blade against his neck, it said, "You will be. So, now, what you can tell me about the other bandits?" replied Naruto. Izan and Nemu stood side by side, their belongings packed. A portal to this new world was being anxiously opened by Mayuri. They were curious about what kind of people or things lived on the other side. Izan smiled nervously and said, "So, Nemu, are you ready for this?" She stated bluntly, "I am, so as not to appear weak in front of her father. I will explore as ordered." "Yeah," Izan replied, turning to observe Mayuri at work. Mayuri turned to face the two girls after standing in front of the viewing machine. "We are almost ready," he said, passing them 2 badges of modified lieutenants. Both girls nodded, and he went on, "These will be your homing signals in case something goes wrong. Just put some Ryastu into them and we will hone in on your positions. You need to first find a settlement and observe the people. Next, find out if they have any type of powers at all, and lastly, see if there is any hollow activity there." They all said, "Yes, Captain," and Mayuri grinned. He said, "Now, let's get this show on the road," and pressed a button to turn the machine on. A loud noise soon filled the room. For them, a Senkimon with white and black doors opened. His words, "I wish you good researching," came as he watched the girls walk through the door. To put it mildly, the journey through the Senkimon was unique. After passing through, they discovered that trees encircled them. Nemu turned to face the sun, which was shining down on them. Izan noticed numerous animals that she recognized running around. Nemu gave the order, "Let's get moving," and took charge. Izan trailed behind, and they soon came to a road. Izan mumbled, "Well, this is convenient." Nemu gave a nod of agreement. She told Izan, "This makes things easier." As they drove down the street, before long, a town appeared, and they saw lots of people moving about. Then they saw that a large number of people were also observing them. Izan asked her companion, "Is it just me, or do they see us?" "It seems that way," Nemu said in response, "but let's test that theory." Walking over to one of the street vendors, they waited for a response. "What can I get you this fine day, ladies?" he asked, grinning at them. "Are you able to see us?" Nemu inquired, and the vendor gave them a crazy look. His face bewildered, he said, "Of course, who won't notice 2 pretty lasses," and he snatched Isane's hand and dragged her to the stall, saying, "Let me show my fine items." Izan whispered in horror as she turned to face Nemu, "He can touch me." With a slow nod, Nemu turned to face the vendor and said, "I'm sorry, but we have to go," dragging Izan away. They observed that they were literally bumping into everyone they passed as they went. As they left town, Izan whispered, "What's going on?" After giving it some thought, Nemu said, "It seems that we are just like the living in this world." "So it seems," Izan said, her face displaying astonishment. This phenomenon was noted by Nemu in her notebook. "So, what should we do?" Izan inquired. With a, "We just have to adjust our way of doing things," Nemu got to his feet. "How can we accomplish that?" Izan said, perplexed. As night fell, they set up camp in a clearing in the forest, and as they got ready for the night, they discovered that it was too quiet. "We act like everyone else," Nemu said matter of factly, and they continued walking down the road. Izan nodded as they went. Izan remarked, "This is creepy," as she peered around the forest. "Yes, it is," Nemu said, surveying the area. "Perhaps it's because there's a lot of hollow activity at night." To which Izan replied, "I don't think so, I don't feel any hollows near at all." Nemu decided to get up and said, "We will have to verify this. I shall scout around and see what I can find." Izan said, "I don't think that is a good idea," sensing someone was watching her. Nemu reassured her, "I won't be gone long," and vanished into the trees. Nemu tried to feel any hollow Ryastu as she walked, but she was unable to do so. She felt a strange energy that she was unable to fully understand. She stopped and tried to use her senses, but she was quickly knocked out after being grabbed from behind. When Isane saw that Nemu's spiritual pressure had abruptly decreased, she hurried to her feet, took out her Zanpakuto, and waited with her senses sharpened. She felt a tremor beneath her as she listened, and when she attempted to move away, 2 hands grabbed her and pulled her under. Naruto leapt from tree to tree, making his way to the bandit's camp. The bandit he had apprehended and silenced informed him that a group of missing nin from Kumo led the group. They were C-ranked missing nin. Naruto sighed, hoping that at least one of them would put up a good fight. 5 clones soon appeared beside him, and he gave them instructions to scout the camp's perimeter and see if they had any prisoners. He soon received the clones' memories and discovered that they had a cage of women close to the west side of the camp, and that the missing nin had brought in 2 more. They were taken to a tent in the center of the camp, and he knew he had to save them before something bad happened. He said, "Let's do this," and vanished into the night. When Isane opened her eyes, she saw that she was nearly nude, stripped down to her underwear, and tied to a pole. Nemu was standing next to her, wearing a black bra and panties, and she looked around to see that their belongings were in a pile in the corner. The flap of their shelter opened abruptly, revealing 2 men with strange symbols on their foreheads that to her appeared to be a pair of clouds but had a line through them. "Looks like one is awake," a short, average height man with green hair said. "Who are you?" As she fought against her restraints, Isane uttered those words. The shorter man grinned and said, "I am your new master. Now, be a good girl, and it won't hurt much." "I am going to die here," Isane thought as she attempted to remove her bonds, but they were too tight. The air was suddenly filled with the sound of death, and a bandit rushed in and yelled, "We're being attacked," only to run outside once more. After exchanging glances, the taller man said, "Go check it out." His partner nodded and went to follow his instructions. "Where were we?" the other one asked, glancing at Isane, moving toward her. As he fought, memories of one of his clones crossed his mind. One of the missing nin was out and prepared to fight. Naruto headed toward the center of the camp and landed in front of the man. Naruto had made over 50 clones and had them attack the camp all at once. He had assigned a group of clones to free the girls from the cages and lead them to safety. The nin angrily remarked, "So, you're the one who attacking out camp?" Naruto grinned and said, "Yep, that me." The nin said, "Okay, I'll just kill you and go back to having my fun," and proceeded to perform a few hand signs, including Doden, Mud Dragon Justu. A big dragon emerged from the ground and came toward Naruto. He dodged to the side and used his own set of hand signs, Fuden, air bullets. The missing nin's eyes widened, and he flashed a series of hand signs, Doden, earth wall. A wall of earth rose from the group and blocked the wind. Naruto ran toward him and climbed up the wall, jumping off the top, a ball of blue energy forming in his hand, Rasengan. Naruto thrust his hand forward and caught his target in the head as he landed, leaving nothing of the missing nin. Naruto remarked, "One down and one to go," and made his way to the tent containing the 2 girls. Isane watched in terror as the man approached her. She attempted to escape but was unable to do so. Just as he was about to seize her, a blade exploded through his heart, and she watched in horror as the man fell to the ground, dead. She turned to see who her victor was. A tall, long-haired man with long, blonde hair who, like the others, wore a headband, but it was adorned with a different symbol. He asked, "Are you okay?" and reached for her hand. Isane, not sure what he was doing, tried to back away, but he saw it and stopped. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, holding his hands up. Isane looked at him and slowly nodded, and he came toward her and untied her bonds. She pulled her arms close to her body as they fell from the pole because she was so afraid that if he hadn't come, that man would have had his way with her. She shivered and began to cry, but when she looked up, she saw that the man had removed his jacket and placed it around her. He left her, went over to Nemu, and untied her, holding her gently in his arms while she was still unconscious. She said, "Thank you," as he put Nemu down gradually. "It's not a problem," he smiled, "just doing my job." Isane nodded and started to follow him, but she stopped to retrieve their Zanpakuto, not realizing she had left the modified badges in the tent. "Let's get out of here," he said, taking Nemu in his arms and leaving the tent. The door opened, and Nemu tensed as she saw Isane enter with a bowl of food in hand. She was wearing a black shirt that seemed to hug her figure, and white capri pants. Nemu opened her eyes slowly and looked around, realizing that she was in a bed and not completely dressed. She sat up, held the blanket to her, and looked around to see where she was. She smiled as she said, "Oh good, you're awake. Where are we?" Nemu surveyed the room before asking. We were attacked 2 nights ago, and you've been out cold, Izane said, placing the bowl of food on a nightstand. We are currently in an inn. How are we here, then? Fearful of the response, Nemu inquired. Nemu turned to see a man with blonde hair standing by the door, and he said, I will be the one to answer that. Naruto Uzumaki, at your service. What took place? Nemu asked. Izane proceeded to explain what had happened. Nemu listened and became extremely grateful for what Naruto had done for them. She turned to Izane and questioned, where are our things? I was unable to obtain the badges, and I was only able to grab our Zanpakuto, Izane acknowledged. Nemu glanced at Izane in disbelief. They were unable to move. They were unable to return home without those badges. When Naruto saw this, he realized they were having problems. He smiled and said, hey, it's okay. You guys can come with me to Konoha. Konoha? Nemu asked, his gaze probing, saying, yeah, it's my home. I think we can help you try to get home. Nemu was aware that they would not be able to make it home alone. Fine, okay, Nemu concluded. Great, Naruto grinned and said, well, I'll leave you two alone. If you need me, I'll be in the next room. Nemu asked, glancing at her partner, do you think we can trust him? Izane nodded while glancing at Nemu. He saved us when he could have had our way with us, but he didn't. So I think we should trust him. With a, fine, we will trust him for now. Nemu ate the food on the table. Can you also help me locate some clothing? After walking up the road, Naruto, Nemu, and Izane soon arrived at the massive gates of Konoha, which Nemu and Izane viewed with wonder, having never seen anything like them before. As they got closer, they saw that a lot of people were staring at the gates. What is causing them to stare? Izane simply shrugged when Nemu whispered to her. After stopping at the front gate, they noticed the 2 gate guards approaching them. One of the guards greeted the group, welcome to Konoha, and then he saw that Naruto was one of the 3. Hey, Naruto, how you been? Hey, Azumo, Naruto grinned and said, I've been fine, just finished a mission. Azumo grinned and said, niece, turning to face Nemu and Izane. And, who are these 2 lovely ladies? Nemu gave Azumo a perplexed look as Izane flushed. Grinning, Naruto started the introductions. This is Nemu and Izane. I helped them out while on my mission. I am taking them to see the Tsunade Ka-san to see if we can help them get home. That's our Naruto, Azumo remarked, giving him a back pat. Taking out a clipboard, he asked them to write their names on it. Azumo grinned when everything was said and done. Enjoy your stay in Konoha. After bidding Azumo farewell, Naruto resumed his stroll, the girls trailing closely behind. Izane gazed in wonder at the village. It was enormous. She noticed 5 faces emerging from the cliffside as she looked up. As they walked, she asked herself, I wonder who they are. Nemu saw people running around the village wearing headbands similar to Naruto's. Everyone wearing it appeared to be a member of some group, and this group appeared to be quite sizable. She also noticed that many of them stopped to greet Naruto or waved, indicating that they respected him. Nemu's interest was piqued when a huge tower soon came into view. Naruto led them up to the summit of the tower and said, let's go see Ka-san. They were approaching a big set of doors when a short-haired black girl in a black-blue kimono looked up to see them approaching. She leapt to her feet and ran to embrace Naruto like a bear. I missed you, she grinned as she spoke. Naruto, me too, Shizune Oni-chan, concurred, but I've only been gone a week. She laughed as she remarked, that's true, but it's still too quiet without you here. Naruto simply smiled broadly and laughed. Then Shizune saw Nemu and Izane standing behind him. Naruto, who are the 2 women behind you? Naruto said, this is Nemu and Izane, introducing the 2. I helped them on my mission and I brought them to talk to Ka-san to see if we can help them get home. Shizune said, that is Sayu, Naruto, with knowledge. Be nice, she's having a bad day. He said, got it, and made his way to the doors. Hi Ka-san, he exclaimed as he opened the door. Tsunade leapt from her seat and turned to face her son. She yelled, Naruto, and punched him across the room. Izane and Nemu watched in confusion as Naruto crashed into the ground after flying through a wall. Don't startle me like that. Naruto rose slowly and approached. Sorry, Ka-san, he acknowledged, grinning. After grinning, Tsunade turned to face the girls. She looked at her son and asked, Naruto, why are there 2 girls with you? If you got them pregnant, you're responsible for your actions. Nemu gazed at Tsunade as though she were insane, and Izane flushed. She comforted Tsunade, saying, no, that is not what's going on. Naruto offered to bring us here and see if you could help us get home. Oh, he did. Tsunade shook her head and muttered, She looked over at Naruto. So, how did you meet them? Tsunade listened carefully as Naruto continued to deliver his mission report. Her son was staring at her. We can see what we can do, but in the meantime, they're your responsibility while they're in the village, is that understood? Yes Ka-san, he grinned and said. She smiled and turned to face Nemu and Izan. That's a good boy, she said. Welcome to Konoha. I am Tsunade Senju, Godiami Hokage. I am Izan Katetsu. Izan bowed slightly. Nemu mimicked her friend and said, Nemu Kuratsuchi, as well. When Tsunade said, it is nice to meet you, so where are you two from? Izan began to feel anxious as she wondered what they would tell her, but Nemu came up with the solution. We come from across the sea. We're here to see what your culture is like and how we can find ways to help each other. Tsunade squinted her eyes. Although she knew she could prove anything, she had the feeling that something was wrong with their story. Furthermore, it appeared that their desire to learn more about them was entirely sincere. She made the decision to always have Naruto with them and to have some Anbu follow them. Her smile said, Welcome to Konohagakure. Izan said, Thank you for having us, with gratitude. Tsunade's voice became solemn. While you are in our village, you are to stay with Naruto at all time, is that clear? Yes, ma'am, they all said at once. Naruto caught Tsunade's attention. Take care of them. He smiled and said again, Yes ma'am, as they left her office. She reached for a bottle of sake and told herself, I feel like life is going to get a lot more interesting. Mayuri waited for Nemu to check in while standing by his machine. More than 3 days had passed since they were meant to check in to report their progress after the first day. He initially assumed it was just Nemu being her typical dimwit, but he knew she wouldn't be this late. Activate their homing beacons, he instructed one of the researchers to do. A few minutes later, Mayuri was waved at by one of the researchers. Sir, he said sadly, we can't find their signals. Mayuri screamed, What do you mean? We can't find their signals? Their signals were not detected, according to a brief screen scan. With careful consideration, Mayuri thought, this can't be good. In front of the other captains, Captain Mayuri told Nemu and Izan what had happened. He attempted to explain it away as an equipment malfunction, but it appeared that some people didn't believe him. Stop trying to play it off as it is nothing, yelled Captain Hitsugaya. We lost 2 lieutenants and you're stating it a simple equipment malfunction. With a glance at the diminutive captain, Mayuri said, That is what I am saying. It is nothing to worry about, and anyway if Nemu is lost I can always make another. Captain Byakuya Kuchiki said, What did you just say about your lieutenant? With a hint of rage in his voice. Disgraceful. I would much rather see it as upgrading to a better model, Mayuri said. Byakuya gave him a furious look and tried to move forward, but one of the other captains stopped him. Enough of this, said Head Captain Yamamoto. We will wait a few more days before sending someone to see what had happened to Lieutenant Katetsu and Kuratsuchi. Dismissed. On their way to his house, Naruto guided Nemu and Izan through the streets of Konoha. Naruto grinned broadly and said, I'm glad you guys are staying with me. With the Chunin exams coming up, it would have been difficult to find a hotel room. Chunin exams? Nemu asked, her expression bewildered. Nemu nodded, and they proceeded. Naruto struck himself in the forehead and muttered, I so stupid, which made Izan laugh. Sorry, I forgot you're not from around here. I explain once we get to my place. Nemu saw a girl with short pink hair rush towards them as they were walking. She yelled, Naruto, and took hold of his collar before giving him a violent shake. You ruined my date with Sasuke. Do you know how long I've been waiting for that? Do you? She said. As the pink-haired girl continued to beat their caretaker to a bloody pulp, Nemu watched in awe. He lay on the ground, groaning in agony, and she stood over him, panting. That will teach you not to train near us, she responded. I understand your desire to exact revenge on him for ruining something very important, but we need him alive if you please, Izan said, grabbing the pink-haired girl's attention. The girl said, Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Sakura Haruno, and I'm a Jonin from Konoha. I am Izan Katetsu, replied Izan. We are new to the village and Naruto was put in charge of our safekeeping. Sakura said, somewhat surprised, you're getting protected by him. If Naruto is protecting them, they must be important people, she thought. Yes, we are, replied Nemu. You're in good hands, Sakura said with a smile. There is never a better guy around, even though he can be a bit dim and foolish at times. Izan remarked, that great thing to know, knowing that they were in capable hands. Naruto grinned and slowly rose from the ground, ready to go now that all of his wounds and bruises had healed. Naruto grinned and said, Thanks Sakura, I didn't know you care. Sakura then punched him across the street. Sakura said, Baka. and turned to leave. With a sigh, Naruto rubbed his head in an attempt to ease the pain and said, I really need to stop pissing her off. Leaning down to check on Naruto, Izan hurried over and asked, was it smart to enrage her? After Izan examined him, Nemu said as he got to his feet. No matter what I do, I will always manage to piss her off, Naruto sighed. Nemu remarked, well, that is unfortunate. I'm sure you're hungry, so let's get you some food, Naruto said, getting to his feet. Mayuri stood in front of the viewing screen, searching for Nemu and Izan, but he was unable to locate them no matter what he tried. He tried tuning it to detect high spiritual pressure, but instead it detected thousands of large spiritual pressures, and he watched in a way the people of this world had a lot of power before head Captain Yamamoto entered to conduct additional research. Have you made any headway in your search for the lieutenants? He inquired. I have not, Mayuri replied, but I have found out something very interesting. And what is that, pray tell, asserted Yamamoto. When I looked for the lieutenant's spiritual pressure, I discovered thousands or even millions of extremely high spiritual pressures. These worlds seem to have a lot of powerful people in them, Mayuri remarked. It is impossible to lock them up with that many strong spirits. This is very troubling, Yamamoto stated. I want you to continue to monitor this world and also keep up the search for the lieutenants. Mayuri said, yes, head captain, and immediately returned to her work. After guiding Nemu and Izan to a spacious two-story home, Naruto greeted them with the words, welcome to my humble abode. You're a local. Izan, who had previously seen houses like this but never imagined Naruto would live in one, asked in amazement. He smiled and said, of course, where did you think I lived? With a flush of shame, Izan says, I guess I never thought about it. He said, it's fine, as he made his way down the hall to the living room. Nemu noticed that the house was nicely furnished and that most of the walls were covered with pictures. She looked at a few of them and saw that one of them showed a small Naruto standing with an elderly man wearing an odd hat. She kept looking at the pictures and saw that most of them featured Naruto and other people, but none of them featured him and his parents. Eventually, she came across one that showed a man who appeared to be Naruto and a stunning woman with red hair massaging her belly. Nemu thought, that must be his parent, and Izan sat down on the couch after watching Nemu. His house was very welcoming, and it seemed like a great place to raise a family. As they looked around the house, they saw that Naruto was in the kitchen preparing dinner, using 3 clones to help him finish quickly, making smoked salmon with rice and steaming vegetables. Most of his friends were preoccupied with their jobs or their romantic lives, and he thought it was nice to have people over. Hinata had gotten together with Kiba after Naruto told her that he didn't like her the way she liked him. She was sad but soon found the happiness she deserved in Kiba's arms. Sasuke had declared his love for Sakura after Naruto had brought him back, and Naruto had simply stopped caring if he would find love. He immediately composed himself as he cooked and considered that, saying, can't dwell on it now. He then went on to cook. An hour later, the food was ready and the table was set, so Naruto made sure everything was ready before going into the living room, where he saw Nemu standing by his bookshelf with a book on beginning chakra control in her hand, while Izan was sleeping on the couch. Naruto smiled and approached Nemu, who was too preoccupied to notice him because she was reading a book that explained that everyone in this world uses a power called chakra, which is the combination of the physical and spiritual energies in their bodies. She was about to learn how to access this energy when she felt a hand on her shoulder, jumped, and fell to the ground, waiting for Mayuri to scold her for not paying attention, but she eventually remembered where she was and saw Naruto standing over her. He offered her his hand and said, sorry for startling you. Nemu accepted it, and he pulled her to her feet. She said, it's fine. However, Naruto saw that she was concealing something, and he decided to ask her later even though he knew he shouldn't. Well, okay, he replied with a grin. Dinner is ready, and I'll wake Izan and meet you in the dining room. That's okay, she replied, but paused before asking, where is the dining room? Grinning, Naruto gestured to a door on the opposite side of the wall. Nemu nodded, then made her way to the dining room, saying, just through there. After approaching the couch and leaning over Izan, Naruto gave her a gentle shake and said, Izan, it's time to get up. Izan squinted and went into combat mode when she noticed a hazy figure above her. After punching her assailant in the stomach, she positioned herself on top of them, poised to attack. She caught a glimpse of her assailant and recognized Naruto. I'm really sorry, it was a reflex, she said, leaning in close. Because she was so close to him, Naruto couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was, and he blushed. He looked at her and said, it's fine. Are you hurt? She asked him, her voice worried. As she leaned closer, Naruto's blush became even more red. I'm fine, he said, blushing when he looked at her. Could you please get off me? At last, Izan realized she was straddling the blonde. She blushed in embarrassment and hurried off of him. She looked away from him as she said, "I'm so sorry." He grinned and turned to face the flushed girl. "It's okay," he said, "you were just surprised by everything." Izan smiled as she turned to face Naruto. Being a gentleman, he was making extra efforts to ensure her comfort. Izan said, "I just glad you're alright." When Izan laughed, Naruto grinned and said, "It will take more than a punch to the gut to take me down." Naruto also laughed a little. He calmed down after a minute and said, "Well, dinner is ready, so come on, let's eat." As Naruto and Izan walked into the room, Nemu watched. After entering the dining room, she waited for a while before hearing a noise coming from the adjacent room. She found the entire exchange between the blonde and the sliver to be quite humorous. She saw the spread on the table as they sat down to eat. It took over an hour to prepare and appeared to feed at least 5 people. She gazed at the blonde, wondering how he managed to finish everything. Nemu turned to face Naruto, who was grinning and chatting to Izan about the food when she began to sense his spiritual pressure. It seemed insignificant at first, but she soon realized that he was repressing it quite effectively, as if it were instinctive. She discovered that he was under a great deal of spiritual pressure as she looked past it. There was more, but it was as big as Ichigo Kurasaki's when he battled Izan. She felt his power and wondered, what is he? When she heard someone calling her name, she snapped out of her reverie. She turned to see Naruto beckoning. "Yes," she replied. With concern, he inquired, "Are you okay?" "I am fine," Nemu said, looking at him bewildered. "Why do you ask?" "Well, you haven't touched your food," he said with concern. "I was wondering if you were feeling well." When she realized this, a flush came over her face. "Oh, sorry, I was think," she said, hoping he wouldn't reprimand her. He smiled and said, "Oh, that's okay. I thought you were sick or something." She was taken aback by his response, but she kept it to herself. He appeared to be worried about her well-being. A barely perceptible smile spread across her face. She said, "Thank you for your concern," and began to eat. When Naruto saw her smile, he returned the smile. He said, "No problem," and they carried on eating. As she sat on her bed, Nemu thought about what had happened during their journey to this world. Although there were no indications of hollow activity at this time, it appeared that the people here were under a lot of spiritual strain. She was particularly perplexed by the people's culture. They appeared to combine elements of the Soul Society and the modern world, but in a completely different way. She was still thinking when she didn't notice Izan enter the room wearing just a big T-shirt. Izan said, "Hey Nemu," to get the Nemu's attention. "Yes, Izan?" she inquired, unsure of her partner's desires. Izan sighed as she sat down beside her, saying, "It's been a weird couple of days, hasn't it?" After giving it some thought, Nemu nodded. A weird couple of days had passed. Everyone here could see and feel them, and they had traveled to a new world about which they knew nothing. A gang of bandits kidnapped them and almost raped them, but their new blonde friend came to their rescue. He served as their bodyguard while they were staying at his house. After gathering her thoughts, she finally said, "Yes, it has been." Looking up at the ceiling, Izan lied back and said, "This world is a lot different from the Soul Society." "Yes, it is," Nemu replied, "and I can't wait to learn more about it." After grinning and thinking of a certain blonde, Izan said, "I feel the same." She then stood up and went to her bed. "Good night, Nemu." After saying, "Sleep well, Izan," Nemu shut off the light and climbed into her bed, where the blankets encased her body, allowing her to drift off to sleep and dream about a certain blonde. Sensing Nemu and Izan in the house and everyone else in the village, Naruto sat on his roof collecting sage chakra, feeling a familiar presence fill his head. Kyuubi said, "Hi brat," inside Naruto's head. With a sigh, Naruto released the nature chakra he had collected and said, "Hey Kyuubi, how are you?" "Oh, I see. I was just curious if you would mate with the 2 people in the house," Kyuubi said, grinning perversely. "Arrow. Kitsune," Naruto said, shaking his head. Following the war, he and Kyuubi had developed a somewhat tense friendship. Without Kyuubi, Naruto would have died as a child, and Kyuubi knew that without him, he would be imprisoned in a statue with his siblings. Their friendship worked at times, and at other times, they wanted to murder one another, but they overcame all of that. "You want to," Kyuubi said, rolling his eyes. "You've been staring at them all day, particularly the tall one." "I have not," a flushed Naruto said. "You can't fool me brat," Kyuubi said. "I've been with you since you were born. I know you better than you do." Knowing the fuzzball was correct, Naruto sighed and tried to dismiss it, saying, "So what? Is it illegal to find someone attractive?" "No, it's not," Kyuubi responded, laughing, "but not doing anything to get them in bed with you is." Shaking his head, Naruto said, You're a pervert, you know that. I can't believe I share with a perverted fuzzball, he thought to himself. Hey, I am a super pervert, not a pervert, Kyuubi said. Naruto uttered the words, it's Ero. Senin all over again. You did not just do that. Kyuubi chuckled. Kyuubi laughed all the way as Naruto said, Ero. Kitsune, and got up to go to bed. He put on his crystal that his mother had given him, yawned, and tangled his hair before rushing out of the house and into the backyard, to his own training grounds, where he looked around and breathed in the morning air as the sun began to peek over the Hokage monument, signaling Naruto to get up and begin his training. The original Naruto grinned to himself, made his favorite hand gesture, and said, let's get this start. Suddenly, a thick cloud of smoke filled the air, and Naruto found himself surrounded by more than 150 ready.to. Go clones. Okay guys, you know the drill. The original Naruto said, and a battle cry filled the air, signaling the start of the battle. After a loud explosion woke Nemu and Isane. They both got out of bed and prepared for battle, but they saw no one there. They then ran to the window and looked out, and to her utter shock, she saw that Naruto was a fight clone of himself because that was the most normal thing in the world. Inquiring as to what was happening, Isane said, Nemu, what is it? Nemu stepped away from the window and uttered the words, look. Like Nemu, Isane was astounded when she saw the Naruto battle royal. How is that possible? She looked at Nemu and stammered. She stormed out of the room toward the battle, saying, I have no idea but I plan to find out. She was only wearing her bra and underwear, but she didn't realize it. In an attempt to stop Nemu from going outside, Isane ran after her and yelled, Nemu wait. However, Nemu was too far away. Nemu went out the back door and headed toward the battling Narutos, stopping by one of the trees to observe the battle. Nemu believed that one Naruto was fighting all the others. The original Naruto was eliminating clones from all sides, and he had set his sights on Taijustu and his futon Justice. He dodged an attack from his left and flashed 5 hand signs, futon, wind dragon bullet, then took a deep breath and exhaled a huge wind powered dragon that ripped through many of the clones, and Naruto defeated a group to his left with a barrage of punches and kicks. He then leapt into the air and proceeded through another set of hand signs, futon, wind blades, and then, with a wave of his hand, a massive blade of wind tore through the remaining clones. After a few moments, he stood up, raked his hair, and let out a sigh. He told himself, need to get faster, as he stretched. Nemu saw that he was shirtless and that he was well built, not too much like a bodybuilder but more like a martial artist. Nemu also saw that he had numerous scars all over his torso, but the one that stood out the most was the one that was the size of a fist and was located close to his heart. Nemu thought, what happened to him for that type of scar to happen? As he approached her, she emerged from her hiding spot and asked, Naruto, can I talk for a moment? Hi Nemu, Naruto stammered, but he was thinking, why is she only in her bra and panties? He glanced up and saw Nemu, but he quickly turned away from her, flushed. Kyuubi, on the other hand, was beaming broadly and said, take her now, Kit, you are very fortunate. Keeping his gaze on the ground, Naruto said, shut it, Kyuubi. Hi Nemu, how are you doing today? He asked Kyuubi. Nemu said, I'm fine, but she noticed that Naruto wasn't giving her a look. She thought, I am unattractive. Naruto, is there a reason why you are not looking at me? Nemu, aren't you forgetting something? Asked Naruto after he paused to respond. After giving it some thought, Nemu said, no I am not. Naruto's head turned, allowing him to see Nemu's body once more. She had all the right curves in the right places and was slim and attractive. Emphasizing, Naruto asked, are you sure? After giving it some thought, Nemu felt a clawed draft touch her skin. She noticed that she was only wearing her bra and underwear when she looked down at herself. Nemu turned red and hurried inside, saying, pardon me for a moment. Running as quickly as she could. Isane was on her way outside to fetch Nemu. After noticing Naruto outside without a shirt, Isane sighed and remarked, I guess she finally noticed. She looked at the blonde for a few moments, blushing. Thought to herself, they don't make them like that anymore, blushing. Naruto was preparing breakfast while Nemu and Isane sat at the table. Naruto blushed whenever he looked at Nemu after the incident earlier that morning. While Nemu questioned why he was blushing so much, Isane thought this was funny. She brought the plate to Naruto after finishing her meal. She said, thank you for the meal. Naruto took the plate from her after noticing her and blushing. Naruto blushed and said, no problem. After giving a nod, she returned to the living room and took a seat on the couch. Although she was still a little hurt by what had transpired, she was glad Naruto showed her respect. Because she was a stupid girl, Mayuri would abuse her and yell at her back home. It was pleasant to be treated with kindness rather than as a thing that required repair. As she sat there, she wanted to know more about how Naruto made the clones earlier, even though she knew it had to do with the chakra she had read about the other night. What can they do with it? How does it operate, and how do they control it? Additionally, whether she could learn to use chakra and whether everyone in the group knew how to use it. As soon as Naruto finished cleaning up, Izan sat down with her on the couch. As they sat there, Izan asked Nemu, "So what are plans for today?" After giving it some thought, Nemu said, "I was going to ask Naruto to show us how his powers work." Recalling the clones he was battling, Izan remarked, "Yeah, it would be great to learn how he did that." "Yes," Nemu said, nodding, "it would be very informative and maybe we can learn how to use it as well." Izan gave Nemu a perplexed glance. "You think we can learn how to do that as well?" "I don't know, but what I read last night says they use a power called chakra," Nemu replied. "Chakra?" inquired Izan. As Nemu opened his mouth to respond, a voice behind them said, "Chakra is the combination of the physical and spiritual energies in our bodies. It is essential to live and is also the power behind our justice." Nemu asked in confusion, "Justu?" They weren't from there, Naruto recalled, and they had no idea what he was talking about. To get their attention, he said, "Okay, let me start from the beginning." He approached a chair facing the couch. "We're here in the elemental nations. We are broken up into many different lands and are ruled by the daimyo of each land. There are the samurai forces that the daimyo commands, and there are the shinobi." "Shinobi?" inquired Nemu. "Yes, shinobi," Naruto replied. "They are basically assassin, warriors, or anything we are hired for." Nemu inquired, "You're a shinobi?" He smiled and replied, "Yeah, all my life." Nemu leaned in close to Naruto and said, "Show me." Naruto looked embarrassed and replied, "Sure, but first I think a trip to the library would help you guys understand what I will show you better." With Izan at his heels, Nemu nodded and took Naruto's hand, dragging him from his chair and toward the door. Nemu took a seat among several tall book stacks. After they reached the library, Nemu went ahead and cleared the shelves of all the books about the history of the shinobi and the elemental nations. Books on chakra and justice were reserved for registered shinobi only, so she was unable to access them. So she read as much as she could about the country. The 5 main shinobi villages were revealed to her. Beneath the mist, clouds, rock, sand, and leaves was the village. The only reason she was aware of the 3 of the 4 great shinobi wars was because the 4th had just concluded a few years prior. As Nemu finished one book after another, Naruto watched in wonder. This was crazy, but he had heard of fast readers. In contrast, Izan was reading a light romance book she had discovered in the fiction section. It told the story of a kidnapped leaf ninja and the extent her love would go to in order to save her. She sighed and wished she had someone like that, but unfortunately, nobody in the Soul Society lived up to her standards. She was reading when she saw a tall ninja with silver hair that defied gravity pass by holding a little blue book. Occasionally, he would laugh in a strange way. She pondered the significance of the book he was holding. She had seen a number of men and women reading it, and it must be good if he was reading while strolling. Determined to find a copy, she stood up and made her way to the shelves. Naruto grinned and observed the two as they read. Although he was bored, he was happy that they were enjoying themselves. He took out a scroll and opened a black notebook and pen. As he wrote, he checked to make sure no one was around. Naruto had carried on the Icha Icha series in Jiraiya's honor, as was well known. Though not as frequently as his previous master, he still occasionally featured explicit sex scenes, but he had made it less smut and more story-driven. His conversations with Kyuubi provided the majority of his ideas. The only condition Tsunade put on him was that he would die if he ever caught a glimpse of the women's bath. He was working on Icha Icha. Desert Nights, his most recent edition. This was supposed to be the best one yet. He was writing when he failed to notice Kakashi, his former sensei, approaching him. Kakashi said, "Hey Naruto," which made Naruto jump and hastily shut his notebook. When he turned around, Kakashi was standing above him. "Hi Kakashi. Sensei, how have you been?" Like a pervert, Kakashi grinned and laughed. He grinned wickedly and said, "I've been good, just enjoying your last edition." Naruto gave an eye roll. He said, "I can see that," and then resealed his notebook. When Kakashi saw this, a gleam appeared in his eye. He inquired sweetly, "Is that the final draft for the new Icha Icha?" Kakashi received a shady glance from Naruto. "No." Kakashi tried to retrieve the scroll and said, "But, just a little peek," but Naruto swiftly sealed it in his jacket. No, Naruto repeated. Last time I let you read it beforehand, I didn't get it back at all. I had to track you down and pry it from your hand, remember? Kakashi rubbed the back of his head anxiously and grinned. In an attempt to gain some Icha points, he muttered, sorry. But Naruto was unmoving. Sorry, Kakashi. Sensei, you'll have to wait for it like everyone else, Naruto said as he stood up. Disappointed that his plan didn't work, Kakashi sighed and turned to leave. During this brief discussion, Izan searched the shelves for a copy of the little blue book she had seen but was unsuccessful. Then she saw a little orange book with the same title and picked it up with excitement. She took the seat across from here and walked back to the table where Nemu was seated. She took the book out and began to read. She blushed a little at first, but her redness increased as she read more. Red as a beet, she read about the 5th chapter before slamming the book shut. As she put the book down, she wondered who would write such smut, especially in such great detail. When Nemu heard Izan slam the orange book shut, she looked up from what she was reading. Nemu pondered what was in the book that caused Izan to become so enraged. Izan grabbed the orange one from Nemu as she reached for it after closing her book. Stuttering, "This is not a good read," she said. Nemu gave her a perplexed look, but she quickly dismissed it and returned to her book. Izan hurried to the assistant's desk and handed the book to the librarian. Isane's face and the copy of the Icha she was holding caught the librarian's attention. She removed the book from here out of sympathy for the poor girl. "This is from the old series," informed the librarian. She produced a book with a blue cover and gave it to Izan, saying, "Only old men and perverts read this one. These are the ones you want to read. The new author has made it into a respectable series, enjoy." Izan picked up the book and gave it a questioning glance. Icha. Lonely Nights was the title. Anticipating a copy of the orange book, she opened the book and turned to the first page. She was drawn into the story, much to her surprise. Izan strolled back to read the little blue book comfortably while the librarian grinned. She took out her own copy of the blue book and approached Naruto after spotting him browsing the shelves. She whispered, "Excuse me," to get his attention. She extended a pen and the book. "Can you please sign this for me?" Naruto grinned. "Sure, I'd love to. Who should I make it out to?" Asa said. Asa Yamada, her face flushed. Grinning, Naruto opened the book. He took the pen and wrote, "To Asa, with love, Naruto Uzumaki." He returned the pen and book and saw the smile on her face. She said, "Thank you," as she leaned closer. "If you ever have writer block, I would love to help you out." Naruto blinked. "I'll keep that in mind." Kyuubi's face was beaming broadly. "Take her now, you know you want to." Naruto reddened. "Shut up, Ero. Kitsune." Kyuubi simply laughed and walked away. Nemu sat up after finishing her last book. She then moved every book back to its original location on the shelves. Glancing over Isane's shoulder, she approached her. Izan was too preoccupied with her book to notice Nemu. When they reached a particular section of the book, their faces were flooded with blood. Nemu startled Izan by asking, "Can a woman really bend like that?" Izan shut the book abruptly and looked up at Nemu with a slightly irritated expression. "Don't scare me like that," she said, rising from her seat while holding the blue book. Nemu said, "I apologize if I startled you. It's just that you were so absorbed in that book I was wondering what was going on. Also, it was a fair question. Can we really bend like that?" What Nemu was hinting at made Izan flush. "I don't know, you'd have to try it to know." Nemu's face was flushed as she gazed at Naruto. "Perhaps someday I will," she said softly. She also flushed when she saw the look Nemu gave Naruto. The words, "maybe someday," Izan said. Naruto stood aside and turned to face Izan and Nemu. He saw the flush on their faces as they looked at him. He pondered their situation, but Kyuubi was grinning and laughing strangely. Kyuubi thought, smiling, if he plays his cards right, the kid is going to have a good time. Mayuri stood before the screen, frustration shining in his eyes. He was unable to locate them. He had tried everything, but to no avail. Inside another haystack, locked in a safe in the safest place on Earth, it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. "Where could those blasted females be?" he said in a low voice. The majority of the other Soul Reapers were concerned about their safety, while Mayuri was preoccupied with how to locate the lieutenants. The majority were aware of their mission to this new world, but since they hadn't checked in for more than 2 weeks, many were beginning to fear that something horrible had occurred. Despite knowing that both lieutenants could care for themselves, Captain Unohana was concerned for them and feared the worst because she hadn't heard from them recently. As he pondered his options for dealing with his 2 missing lieutenants, Head Captain Yamamoto sat at his desk. He was aware that Mayuri was making every effort to locate them, but he knew he was insufficient. He needed to consult the most knowledgeable scientist about this. He turned and said, get Mikazuki Urahara. Nemu and Izan were led by Naruto to the Hokage Tower. Nemu had asked to talk to the Hokage about something after the library. Naruto was delighted to comply. They couldn't help but be amazed by the village's serene ambiance as they strolled. Some of the most powerful people in the world lived here, according to what Nemu had read in books. The majority had already passed away, but it was incredible to have that level of strength. She had read that Hashirama Senju, the Shodai Hokage, could actually use his chakra to create a forest. Even the captains would struggle against such individuals if they were common in this world. Before long, they arrived at the Hokage Tower and entered. When Shizune noticed them, she ushered them inside. Suande frowned as she sat at her desk going through her documents. She was relieved to have a break from the paperwork when she saw the group enter. She said, "Hello everyone," with a warm greeting. "We are doing well, thank you for asking," Izan said. Suande said, "That is great, how is the village treating you?" It was Nemu who spoke first. "It has been very pleasant, it is nice to have some peace." Suande questioned, "So, where you're from, there is always strife?" Not wanting to reveal too much, Nemu answered, "Yes, but not in the way you think. It's mostly disagreements between members of the ruling council." Knowing exactly what that is like, Tsunade sighed. "It is quite annoying, isn't it?" "Yes," Nemu sighed in response. Tsunade wanted to get right to the point, so she asked, "So, what brings you to my fine office?" Nemu gave her a long look before continuing. "I was wondering if it is possible for us to learn to use chakra?" Tsunade cocked one side of her head. "I really don't know. We would have to check your chakra coils to see." "Why is that?" Inquiries Izan made. "Most of the time people start to learn to use chakra at a young age. Most adults who try to use it cannot because their chakra coils seal off from lack of use," Tsunade said. "But, since you are not from here, it may be possible for you to use chakra." Nemu grinned, wishing they could teach the other Shinigami and be prepared for any threats if they could master this chakra. "Thanks you for the help." Tsunade grinned. "It's not a problem, but I would like to know if you have anything to teach us in return?" "What do you mean?" Nemu inquired, growing apprehensive. Tsunade looked Nemu in the eyes and said, "Since you are from a faraway land, there must be some foreign knowledge that you can teach us. It seems only fair, if we are to teach you how to use chakra." Nemu remained quiet for a while. "May I have a private word outside with Izan, before I give you our answer?" Nemu inquired. Her decision required Isane's approval. They would miss the chance to learn about this chakra if they didn't divulge any of the techniques, but she didn't want to. "That is fine," Tsunade said. Nemu said, "Thank you," and escorted Izan from the office. Izan gave Nemu a worried look. "What are we going to do? We can't reveal any of our techniques to them. We will be executed if the Saratai finds out." I don't know," Nemu replied. "But, we need to learn about this chakra and see if we can use it. There are risks, but maybe we can bargain with her." Izan paused to reflect. "We can say that we will only teach one person," she said. Nemu said, "That might work, they can't use our techniques anyway." Izan remarked, "We will have to see. Also, what if we can't use this chakra after all, what should we do then?" After giving it some thought, Nemu responded, "Just leave that to me." After Izan gave a nod, they returned to the office, where Suande and Naruto were waiting. Tsunade waited for their response at her desk, hoping they would concur. Nemu moved to the front. "We are willing to teach you our technique, but we have a few stipulations." Tsunade found it fascinating. "Name them," she said, sounding like a savvy negotiator. This response gave Nemu a sense of relief. "First, we are willing to teach you our technique if we're able to use chakra." After giving it some thought, Tsunade responded, "Sounds fair, any others?" Izan added, "We will only teach in person." They caught Tsunade's attention. She questioned, "Why only one person?" "We want to see if they are able to learn our techniques. If we can't learn to use chakra, then maybe you can't learn our techniques," Nemu stated. "That is very true," Tsunade said, reflecting. "I will do it, if you let me choose the one you train." Nemu scowled as she glanced at Tsunade. She hoped they would have a choice, but she sensed that Tsunade wouldn't make any more concessions. Nemu remarked, "We find these terms agreeable," while Tsunade grinned. Suande grinned and remarked, "It looks like we have an agreement. Now the person you are going to train is Naruto." They didn't want to teach someone they didn't know, so Nemu and Izan exhaled with relief. Tsunade grinned. "I figured you would approve of my choice. I presumed that you wouldn't like teaching someone you hardly know, so you're going to train this knucklehead here." The words, "Thank you Hokage," Nemu bowed, so did Izan. "It's fine," Tsunade replied. Now let's go see if the coils are any good, shall we? He sat Urahara at his desk. The Soul Society had just sent him hell butterflies. It appeared that Mayuri had sent 2 lieutenants to explore a new world that was distinct from their own. Regretfully, 2 weeks after their departure, they still hadn't gotten in touch with the Soul Society. In order to see if he could locate the lieutenants and perhaps assist with research, Head Captain Yamamoto had asked him to review Mayuri's design. He was intrigued by this. He was able to acquire and impart knowledge to others from a completely new source after this world was discovered. He chose to assist, grinning to himself. He called out, "Hey, Tessai," and a big, burly man came in. "Yes, Kazuki?" Urahara grinned and said, "Get my tools. We've got a little project to build." Tessai walked to the training area after nodding. He saw a young girl with long orange hair enter his shop as he was leaving his office. Orihime called out, "Sorry, I'm late, everyone," grinning broadly. She had begun working at Urahara's candy store following the Winter War. Although the pay was decent, she was also honing her abilities to become more powerful. She wanted to stop being a burden, but she was happy that she had friends who would do everything in their power to protect her. This inspired her to put in a lot of training. She had become more adept at using her shields as a result. After entering the rear, she donned her work apron. This displayed her amazing physique. She gave everyone a smile before getting to work. Urahara grinned as she observed her work and called out to her, "Hey Orihime," capturing her interest. "Yes, Mr. Urahara? I'm going to need your help with something in the training area," he stated. "It seems that the Soul Society needs my help." Orihime was thrilled to be able to support her friends. She jumped up so quickly that she stumbled and fell, saying, "I'll be right there, owie." Ururu asked, "Are you all right?" as Orihime painfully rubbed her butt. She said, "Yeah, I'm fine," and stood up. Jinta said, "You know, you're still a klutz," but Urahara struck her in the head. He remarked, "It's not nice to be mean to girls," while Jinta tried to ease the pain by rubbing his head. Jinta muttered, "I'm sorry," and hurried to the front of the store. Orihime let out a sigh. He fled a bit too quickly, even though she had wanted to reassure him that everything was fine. She looked over at Urahara. He merely nodded, and they proceeded to the covert training area to begin the project. "Shall we get started?" he asked. Nemu waited for the medic to arrive and examine her while she sat on a hospital bed. Following their conversation with the Hokage, they were immediately taken to the hospital to have their chakra coils examined. Nemu waited to be seen while Izan changed into her hospital gown in a separate room. Who would enter and inspect them, she wondered. Before long, a tall woman with purple eyes and dark blue hair entered through the open door. Nemu was particularly fascinated by the absence of pupils in her eyes. "Hello, I am Hinata Hyuga. I will be your medic today." The answer was, "Nemu Kuratsuchi," Nemu said. "It's nice to meet you." Likewise, Hinata grinned and said, "So, are you ready for your examination?" "Yes," resolutely Nemu replied. Hinata nodded, grinning. "Okay then, lie down for me and I will start the procedure." Nemu obeyed. With a smile, Hinata approached her side. After saying, "This won't hurt a bit," she muttered, "Byakugan." Veins began to pulsate around Hinata's eyes, and Nemu watched. She pondered what she could see now. Hinata examined her chakra coils as Nemu considered this. She noticed that they were still in one piece and could be used as soon as her tenketsu was opened. She had been using the spiritual power instead of the physical, which is why it appeared that her coils were functional. As a result, the coils were preserved and could be opened gradually. Because she needs to increase her reserves, it would take her some time to do any just you. Hinata smiled and remarked, "It looks like you'll be able to use chakra after all." Nemu gasped. "I've been living off false hope," she thought. Nemu nodded, and Hinata opened her 361 tenketsu points, saying, "I am going to open your tenketsu points so your chakra will start to flow." Hinata felt the power begin to flow as she gradually opened each point. She felt better than she had in years because of it. She had the impression that she could play the role of captain without getting sweaty. Nemu's chakra was flowing after Hinata was finished. "All done," a smiling Hinata said. Nemu sat up quickly, but Hinata intervened. "Take it easy, it will take you a while for your body to adjust to having chakra, so you're going to rest for now." Nemu began to say, but Hinata interrupted. "No buts," said Hinata. "You need to let your body adjust or you won't be able to use chakra at all." Nemu gave a nod. She reasoned, "At least I can start learning soon." Hinata had begun to open Isane's Tenkitas points while she was thinking. Izan was eager to find out and could sense the power in her body, but she would have to wait until they were discharged from the hospital. With several bowls of ramen in his hands, Naruto entered the room occupied by Nemu and Izan. He put the food down slowly and said, "Hey guys, how you feeling?" Nemu remarked, "I feel powerful, I feel as if I can take on anything." "I was the same when I started to use chakra," Naruto remarked while taking a seat beside her bed. "It's a great feeling and it will only get better." Nemu remarked, "I am looking forward to it," Naruto grinned. "I'm glad. We're going to have a lot of fun training each other." "Training?" inquired Nemu. "Yeah, I am the one who's going to train you to use your chakra." "I am glad," Nemu said, her smile almost imperceptible. Naruto remarked, "That's good," observing her subtly happy expression. He approached the bowls of ramen and handed one to each girl, saying, "But for now, let's get some food in you guys. Eat up, it's the food of the gods." Izan inquired, "What is it?" "Ramen of course," a smiling Naruto replied. Nemu began eating first, and she had to admit that it was delicious. She usually ate instant ramen, but this time it was made by hand, so it was much better. They soon fell into a relaxed silence. There was only the sound of noodles being slurped. As soon as everyone had finished eating, Naruto went to pick up the bowls that were now empty. Izan couldn't resist grinning. He had always been kind and helpful since they first met. He pledged to assist them in returning home and didn't attempt to take advantage of their vulnerability. All in all, he was a wonderful man who only occasionally appeared. He was now keeping them occupied while they recuperated from activating their chakra. Izan looked over at Naruto. "So, now that we have a moment of peace, tell me about yourself." Naruto smiled. "Okay. I am Naruto Uzumaki, I am 20 years old, and I am Jonin of Konoha. I like ramen, training, pulling pranks, writing, and reading. I dislike traitors, cowards, perverts, rapists, and guys who treat women as objects." Izan and Nemu both shuddered at his. "I enjoy gardening, learning new justice, and my dream is to become the next Hokage." Izan remarked, "Wow, that is a lofty goal." He grinned and said, "Yeah, but I can do it, I never break my promises." Izan remarked, "That's a good trait to have." "Really? Most people think that it makes me an idiot," he said. Nemu remarked, "Well, they're the idiots." Naruto grinned. He turned to face them and said, "Thanks, it means a lot to me." "So, now you know about me. Can you tell me about yourselves?" Nemu gave Naruto a look. "My name is Nemu Kuretsuchi, 21 years old, and researcher. I like research, reading, and learning. I dislike onions, hurtful people." She reflected on her dad and breathed deeply, "and people who treat women with disrespect. I like to conduct research and learn about new things." "You're a researcher," beaming Naruto said. He laughed a little and Nemu gave him a strange look. "I guess that it is to be expected. After all, you were sent here to research. Sorry, bad joke." "It is fine," Nemu acknowledged. After grinning, Naruto turned to face Izan and said, "It's your turn." Naruto smiled as Izan introduced herself. "My name is Izan Katetsu, and I am 22 years old. I am also a researcher and medic," Izan said. "I like reading, helping people, my sister, and my friends. I dislike traitors, cowards, rapists, and men who disrespect women. I like to learn new healing techniques, helping my friends, and hanging out with my sister." "That's cool," a smiling Naruto remarked. "What's your sister like?" Izan sighed as she remarked, "Well, she is a very excitable. She likes to jump into things without thinking, but she is a very loyal person who would never leave a friend behind." "She sounds like a fun person," Naruto grinned. Izan inquired, "Do you have any siblings?" But Naruto's face changed. He said, "I am an orphan, with regret. I never knew who my parents were, till a few years back." Izan regrettably said, "I am so sorry, I didn't mean to bring it up." Naruto smiled amiably at her, saying, "It's fine, I have precious people that I love, so I'm never alone." Izan met his gaze and saw that he was being honest, but he was also concealing a strong sense of isolation. She was unwilling to confront him about it. She smiled and said, "I am glad," but she wondered what could have caused someone to have those eyes. He sighed when he saw the time. "I'd better be off. I've got to get stuff ready for your training tomorrow. See you later." Izan said, "Have a good night," and waved. Nemu remarked, "Have a good day." After giving them a wave in return, Naruto left the room. Nemu turned to face Izan after he had gone. She said, "It seems that our host has had a hard life," with interest. With a, "It seems that way," Izan answered, "but he seems to be stronger for it." "That is true," Nemu concurred. "He is truly different." Izan simply sighed and nodded. She rested her head on her pillow and fell asleep gradually. Nemu sighed as she watched this. She noticed a pen and notepad on the table. After gathering the aforementioned items, she started documenting the events that had transpired thus far. She kept thinking about the blonde as she was writing. He had witnessed horror that could have crippled anyone, but he was still going strong, she could see. He was lively and upbeat. Because of what she had witnessed, he never felt depressed for long. She recalled seeing him train, flushed and without a shirt. Perhaps, just possibly, she had discovered someone with whom she could share her secrets. Mayuri was frowning as he stood outside Urahara's store. He didn't require this man's assistance. Unfortunately, the head captain had instructed him to collaborate with Urahara, even though he could have figured out how to locate the lieutenants on his own. His foray into the living world was not an isolated one. A young woman with black hair, pinned up in the back, accompanied him. She looked like a sexy librarian thanks to her glasses. This was Squad 8 Lieutenant Naneo Eyes. Because he wanted someone to watch Captain Kuratsuchi, the head captain had asked her to go with him. She sighed as she stood next to the clone. Looking captain. Even though she knew that without her presence, none of the paperwork would be completed, she was not happy to be given this mission, but orders were orders. Mayuri complained, "Why do we need this idiot's help?" as they entered the store. Naneo gave him a frustrated glance. The head captain asked Urahara because he believes you need assistance in locating them. Deal with it and accept it. I would prefer to just make 2 new lieutenants. With a sly smile, Mayuri remarked, it would be much faster and might prove useful. Mayuri flinched away from Naneo's gaze as she slowly removed her glasses. You will follow the orders given to you and not mention that idea again, Naneo said, receiving a slight nod from Mayuri. Good. She returned her glasses and made her way to the rear of the shop. The following day, Nemu and Isane were discharged from the hospital, and Naruto was smiling as he waited for them at the front desk. You two, let's get going. We have activities and places to visit. As they walked out of the hospital, Isane asked him, where are we going? He led them down the street and explained, we're going to the Shinobi Outfitters so we can get you guys outfitted for training. But I thought we were only going to learn how to use chakra, Nemu replied. Naruto remarked, yeah, you are, as they blended in with the throng. But, if you're learning to use chakra you have to learn other shinobi skills as well. Nemu remarked, I see, unsure of what else they would discover. By the time you're done training, you will be able to give a Jonin a run for his money, believe it, he said while they were walking. Isane and Nemu followed, curious to see what the day would bring. Nemu and Isane followed Naruto down the street to Wolf's Den, a shinobi store. It was Konoha's best source for shinobi equipment. Naruto reviewed his mental checklist of what he was getting as they strolled. He was going to get them weights, kunai, shuriken, and training equipment first. As they followed him, Nemu and Isane pondered what kind of shinobi equipment they would receive, but they would soon learn. They soon reached the Wolf's Den and went inside. A young woman with a bun in her hair was behind the counter when they walked in. Tenten Hyuga was Neji Hyuga's wife. She had been employed at her father's shop ever since she was appointed Konoha's weapon mistress. She grinned as she watched Naruto and the girls come in. Tenten stood up from her chair and said, Hey, Naruto, what brings you here? Naruto grinned. I'm here to help these two get outfitted for basic shinobi training, he replied. Tenten glanced at Naruto, then at Nemu and Isane. She whispered to Naruto, aren't they a little old to start shinobi training? With hope, Naruto glanced at Tenten. Naruto bowed slightly and put his hands together, saying, it's fine. Please, can you help me out? It would be much appreciated. Tenten sighed as she glanced at her blonde friend. She muttered, okay, but you owe me for this, and began to approach Nemu and Isane. Anything, Tenten, he promised. Greetings from the Wolf's Den. Tenten smiled and led them to the ninja clothes in the back, saying, my name is Tenten, and I will be dressing you in our finest merchandise. Shall we? Isane grinned and said, we shall. Pick out what you want, and we will see what fits each of you best, Tenten said as she led them to the racks of clothes. Before long, Nemu and Isane had clothes dangling from their arms, and Tenten ushered them both into the dressing room before waving Naruto over. She said, I need you to stand here for a moment, leaving Naruto wondering what she was planning. Kyuubi, on the other hand, grinned and prepared his camera, knowing exactly what Tenten's plan was. Kyuubi remarked, this is going to be great material for the next book, and gave a twisted laugh. Kyuubi told Naruto to just unwind and enjoy the show, kid. With a puzzled expression on his face, Naruto thought about this. What do you mean? Kyuubi sighed and remarked, you're still pretty dense for the writer of the ICHA series. Naruto complained, just shut it, Arrow. Kitsune, but Kyuubi wasn't in the mood for silence. It's the truth, Kyuubi retorted, you have girls flinging themselves at you. Like that hot librarian from yesterday, you need to get laid. She was willing, after all. You could have gotten your way with her by bringing her into the back room. Icha Icha. Library Dreams is a brand new book that you could have written. Shut up, Arrow. Kitsune, Naruto said, blushing, his thoughts returning to Asa, and he shook his head rapidly in an attempt to shake the images from his head. Go for it, Kit, Kyuubi exclaimed joyfully, do it. Naruto said, I'm not listening, and began to consider ramen. Kyuubi whimpered, no, not ramen, go back to spanking the sexy librarian, while observing the images in Naruto's mind. That's what you get, pervert, the victorious Naruto declared. Kyuubi said, I hate you so much right now, and disconnected. Naruto laughed as he said, love you too. Tenten watched as Naruto abruptly looked off into space and realized he was speaking to the fox. Over the years, all of Naruto's friends were able to tell when he and the fuzzball were speaking because he had a tendency to have a blank expression on his face. At one point, while he was so absorbed in his thoughts, Kiba drew a mustache on his face, which he didn't notice and wore all day. After he realized what had happened, he hunted Kiba down, and everyone in the village could hear his screams. When he appeared to be returning to reality, she approached Naruto. What, then, was the furball after? Tenten inquired. He was being his perverted self again, Naruto replied, letting out a sigh and rubbing his forehead in exasperation. It's like, the only thing on his mind is getting me in bed with every hot, single woman. Tenten said, he may be right, you know, and Naruto gave her a startled look. Are you serious? Naruto answered. I can see the loneliness in your eyes when you come to visit Neji and me, Tenten said, smiling and looking him square in the eye. You need someone in your life, not just to have sex, but to love you, she said. You are worthy of happiness. Furthermore, no one has ever been harmed by a casual relationship. Naruto stumbled and said, but I couldn't do that to anyone. I know, you and your damn morals, Tenten allowed herself to sigh. Saying, yeah, you and your damn morals, Kyuubi interrupted the discussion. Naruto yelled, shut up fuzzball, which caused Tenten to chuckle. She smiled and said, so, it seems Kyuubi agrees with me. The answer was, yeah, Naruto sighed. Tenten patted him on the shoulder and remarked, well, it's up to you what you do. Naruto sighed and simply nodded, saying, I just can't do casual. I find someone to hook you up with if you can't do casual, she said, giving him a pat on the back. With horror, Naruto gazed at Tenten and said, please, no. Why not? Tenten questioned, gazing at the ghostly, pale figure before him. The last time someone set me up on a date, I was nearly raped by a fangirl, he blurted out. It was the scariest thing I had ever experienced. It's okay, Tenten reassured her friend, who was rocking back and forth in horror at fangirls. He muttered, there were so many. He eventually composed himself and stood up, saying, okay, I'm better now. Tenten laughed, that's good, and said, let's return to the topic at hand. Who are those two? Do they not seem too young to be learning how to be Shinonbi? They are not from the elemental nation, so they didn't know anything about chakra, Naruto said with a sigh. With the Hokage, they struck a bargain. I will study their techniques, and they will learn shinobi arts. You're going to discover something that no shinobi can do, then? Tenten inquired with interest. Yep, Naruto grinned and replied. Tenten gave him a shoulder punch. Good luck. Do you know whether they are armed? Well, they were carrying sword when I found them, Naruto replied. What kind of swords are they? Tenten said as she switched into fangirl mode with her weapon. After responding, just katanas, Naruto saw Tenten lose his confidence. She sighed, oh well, saying, I was hoping for something more exotic. As he was about to respond, Izan called out from her dressing room, saying that she needed help. Naruto sighed and watched Tenten leave, wondering what Izan needed and trying not to imagine her half naked. Not this times, my friend, Naruto said. Orihime sat bored in class, staring at the board and thinking about what was happening back at Urahara shop, and she was devastated to learn that Nemu and Izan were missing. She had made good friends with all the women in the SWA after the war, and she had gotten to know Izan very well. They would talk a lot and laugh together. She and Nemu were friendly, but Orihime had not gotten to know either of them as well as Izan. After hearing the news, she sat with Naneo and sobbed for hours. She wanted to go back and help Urahara try to find them, and she prayed that they were safe and hoped they could return soon. The school day ended when the bell rang, and Orihime grinned to herself before getting up and being stopped by Uryu and Chad. Would you like to get together today, Orihime? Chad questioned her. She headed for the door after saying, sorry, guys got to go to work, but she ran into Ichigo. Sorry there, Orihime, he grinned. She smiled back at him, a soft blush on her face. It's fine, she said and headed out the door. Is Orihime distracted by something, or is it just me? Watching the orange-haired girl vanish into the crowd, he uttered those words. When Uryu said, "It seems she was in a hurry to go work at Urahara's all day," Chad nodded in agreement. Chad remarked, "She just couldn't seem to sit still." Ichigo said, "I just hope she's okay," and left the classroom. Arriving at the shop in record time, Orihime went down to the secret training area. As she stepped off the ladder, she saw Naneo standing by a set of computer screens. She was responsible for keeping an eye on the monitors and hoped to see Nemu's and Isane's spiritual pressures, but she had not found anything inside, wondering where they could be. Thinking about the terrible things that could have happened to them was nerve-wracking. When someone sat down next to her, Naneo was pulled out of her musing. She turned and saw Orihime there and smiled, glad to see a familiar face. "Orihime, how are you today?" A little relieved to have something to divert her attention from the monitors, she asked. The smile returned to Orihime, who said, "I am good, just wanted to get here earlier." "I bet," Naneo smiled, adding that they had grown close ever since they were assigned to work together. "So, have you located them yet?" Orihime inquired hopefully. With a sigh, Naneo simply shook her head and said, "There are still too many spiritual pressures in the world to pinpoint just two." Orihime frowned, "That sucks," and although she was eager to find them, it didn't seem like this world would make it easy. Urahara and Mayuri were discussing strategies for locating the lieutenants while they conversed, but things were not going well. It appeared that the former and the current Squad 12 captain were at odds over how to locate them. "No, I don't think that sending in drones is going to work," Urahara said, furiously massaging his forehead. "What would happen if one was caught and the signal was linked to the Soul Society?" "That's fine," Mayuri stated, waving off Urahara's worry. "We'll just program the drones to kill anyone who comes in contact with it, except the lieutenants." Urahara retorted, "We can't do that, because people would notice the deaths." "So, what would you suggest we do? As for me, I'm still unsure about whether to simply create 2 new lieutenants," Mayuri said. Urahara reminded them, "First of all, the head captain has told you no to creating new lieutenants. Why don't we send in a hell butterfly that will lock onto their spiritual pressures?" "I tried that," Mayuri said, "but there are too many people in the world for it to work. Most of them hold a lieutenant rank or above." "Have you attempted to have them search for the spirit of Zanpakuto?" Urahara proposed. Mayuri replied, "Ofa. Wait, no, I haven't." "Then, we have to try that," Urahara had concluded. Urahara grinned and sat back to watch his clone. Like companion work as Mayuri nodded and began working on the butterfly. Orihime and Naneo had now changed the screen to a vast city area with 5 faces carved on the side of a cliff above the city. They looked around, but they couldn't find anything because there were so many people. One strange thing they saw was that some of the people were wearing headbands. They never seemed to be walking on the road, and they wondered why. "Who are they, in your opinion?" Naneo exclaimed in astonishment. "Perhaps they're simply sick of crossing the street," Orihime said, assuming her contemplative stance. With a smile on her face, Naneo said, "Maybe you're right." The screen began to beep as they were speaking, indicating that a match had been found. Naneo and Orihime hurried to the screens and carefully examined each individual. "I located them." As everyone gathered around her screen, Orihime screamed, and Urahara and Mayuri ran over. She pointed to 3 figures in the crowd and drew a square around them. Enlarge. The figures grew, but their faces remained blurry. Enhance. Eventually, the image became clearer, showing Izan and Nemu standing there with a tall, blonde man who had 3 whisker marks on each cheek and was wearing a headband. Naneo glanced at her friends and said, "Thank Kami, they're okay." With a trace of regret, Mayuri said, "Yes, thank Kami," hoping they wouldn't discover them so he could appoint a new lieutenant. Urahara was beaming. "It seems we know where they are now," he commented. "All we need to do is hone in on their Zanpakutos and they're as good as home." Grinning, Orihime said, "That's fantastic." Looking at them, Mayuri said, "Yes, we did find them, but in order to open the Senkimon, they will require new homing beacons. It appears that this world dislikes it when we open them at random." "How do you know this?" Naneo inquired. Mayuri said, "Test of course," adding that a Senkimon can only be opened at dawn, noon, and dusk. Additionally, a single Senkimon can only be opened each day. It must then be on the ground rather than in the air. Last but not least, it must have a soul. "What's the reason?" Orihime said inquisitively. "It appears that this world is comparable to the Soul Society in that individuals from the Soul Society will be treated as though they were in the land of the living." "I am still testing that," Mayuri said. Even Shinigami would appear to be living souls in that world if they were deceased from the living world. So, do you believe that Izan and Nemu were taken prisoner? Fearing for her friends, Nanao said. Urahara examined the photo and said, that is a definite possibility, but they appear to be quite content to me. Even with an escort, no one would permit inmates to roam the city in such a manner. Perhaps they are so strong that Nemu and Izan would be killed or captured even if they attempted to fight, Nanao volunteered. Come on Mayuri, we have a hell butterfly to make, Urahara said, turning to face his desk. We won't know till we contact them. Nemu examined herself in the mirror. She was dressed similarly to her Shinigami uniform, wearing a purple short kimono with a fishnet shirt underneath, a pair of shin guards on, fishnets down her legs, and ballet shoes, though these were lined with a flexible metal that allowed for wear and tear. On one shoulder, a shoulder guard connected to her waist, enabling her to wear her zanpakuto on her back. I wonder if this is good, he thought, and opened the door. Naruto was sitting on a chair outside the doors when he saw one of them open. He turned to look, blushing as he watched Nemu leave the dressing room, captivated by her beauty and the way the fishnets and short kimono accentuated her curves. How do I appear? Nemu said, her face slightly flushed. You look great. Naruto turned red and turned his head away. She smiled and said, thank you, before returning to the dressing room. You are so lucky, Kit, Kyuubi grinned, having a hot girl model dress for you. Perhaps you could remove them gradually later. Kyuubi wouldn't have it, so he began to show Naruto images of him slowly taking off Nemu's clothes. Shut up, I'm not listening to you pervert, Naruto said, attempting to avoid picturing Nemu. Kyuubi said, do it, Kit, while displaying additional images, she wants you. I am not listening, Naruto said, attempting to think of something else, but he was unable to stop thinking about Nemu. Despite the fact that he had only known her for a short time, he thought she was beautiful, could see the pain in her eyes, knew that something had happened to her to make her the way she was, and wanted to help her and be her friend. A voice called out to him, hey Naruto, and he turned to see Izan standing above him. She had 2 arm guards, a pair of black cargo pants, a fishnet shirt with a gray halter top over it, and a shoulder guard that looked like Nemu's. Finally, she had on a pair of black shinobi sandals, and Naruto blushed intensely once more. He asked himself, why do kunoichi look so damn hot? Kyuubi said, Kit, they're not kunoichi yet, they're just hot, and Naruto was once more inundated with images of Izan gradually taking off her clothes. Naruto said, blushing, please stop this. Just take her now, Kyuubi repeated. Will you? Go away, you arrow. Kitsune, Naruto uttered. Are you okay, Naruto? Izan questioned as she observed Naruto nod off as he approached her, his face still flushed. How'd I look? He asked, grinning and nodding. Naruto simply nodded when Izan asked, well, I think he likes it. After watching the entire show, Tenten couldn't help but laugh at her blonde friend, who was sitting there nodding his head foolishly because she looked good in her outfit. I'll get this, she said and went to change. Tenten said, men, and approached him, pointing to his dazed expression with a wave of her hand before saying, Ichiruka is closing for good. No. Naruto shouted, jumping to his feet, getting weird looks from everyone in the store. He looked around and gave everyone a sheepish expression. Sorry. Tenten laughed at Naruto and collapsed to the ground. He exclaimed, it's not funny. But Tenten couldn't help but laugh. Tenten started to say, I'm sorry, Buddha, before she burst out laughing. He said, you suck. You know that? She said, I know I do, but not you, which made Naruto stiffen and made her laugh even more. I knew it, yelled Kyuubi. Why didn't you get this one when you had the chance? You're not helping, Kyuubi was informed by Naruto. With a sigh, he turned to Tenten. You done yet? Tenten stopped laughing slowly and stood up. Yeah, I'm good. He said, glad I could make your day, with a faint smile. Tenten grinned. She said, so am I, and made her way to the main counter. Without knowing what had happened between the two friends, Nemu and Izan strolled over to the main counter. Neither of them had changed from their respective attire. This made Naruto blush, but he was able to conceal it better than when he first saw them. As Tenten observed this response, a strategy began to take shape in her thoughts. She thought to herself, it looks like I need to gather everyone for a Naruto meeting. When she noticed Naruto waving a hand in front of her face, she snapped out of her reverie. Yes? She asked, emerging from her reverie. As Tenten began to write down the order, Naruto remarked, I want to buy at least 5 pairs of each outfit. Next I need 1,000 shuriken, 600 kunai, 600 explosive tags, and 2 sets of basic sealing scrolls. Tenten proceeded to the register after taking down the entire order. The bill arrived shortly after, and she was informed that it's going to be a 58,282 yen. With a simple nod, Naruto took out his wallet. He pulls out a bill for 100,000 yen and gives it to Tenten. Is that enough? Tenten grinned as she made change. Of course, she said. After giving him his change, she went to the back and took everything he had purchased off the shelves. She needed some time to gather everything, but eventually everything was sealed and prepared for use. Grinning, she placed the sealed scrolls on the counter. Is there anything else I can get you? Grinning, Naruto gave her a piece of paper. Picking up the sealed scrolls, he said, send the usual amount, and left the room. Tenten grinned as he watched them go. She said, this is going to be interesting. I've got to call the others, before beginning work on Naruto's custom order in the back of the store. Naruto guided Isane and Nemu back to his house. He instructed them to get their swords and dropped off their supplies. After saying, meet me in the back when you're ready, he went outside. After nodding, Nemu and Isane went upstairs to retrieve their Zanpakutos. As they strolled, Isane remarked, I wonder why he wants us to get our Zanpakuto. Retorting, we won't know till we get outside, Nemu took her blade from her closet. Before long, they had them strapped to their backs and were leaving for the rear training ground. They noticed Naruto sitting and meditating in the center of the grounds. As he pulled the Riryoku and another injury from the surrounding plants and air, Nemu saw it. She wondered, how is he doing that? Few people were able to gather so much Riryoku from their surroundings, but here was Naruto, carrying it out as though it were the simplest task in the world. What is he? Naruto said, I'm glad you guys arrived so fast, as he opened his eyes and released the nature chakra. He got up and approached them. First thing we need to do is see what level of combat you guys are at before we begin your training. Why is that? Inquiries Isane made. I need to see what areas we need to improve on, in your training in being shinobi, said Naruto. Isane grinned and said, okay then, great, said Naruto. First things first, I am going to spar with each of you individually. First up is Nemu. Isane stepped back and nodded. Grinning, Naruto crossed the field to the opposite side. Shall we begin? Nemu said, yes, let's, and assumed her stance. To protect her face, she stood with her hands in front of her and her legs bent. On the opposite side, Naruto was standing in a very easy position. Naruto grinned and said, hey, Nemu, a word of advice, come at me with the intent to kill. Nemu gave a nod and started moving quickly. Naruto blocked her straight right with his forearm and countered with a left hook after she cocked her fist. Nemu swiftly swerved to avoid the blow and lowered herself left-handedly to his side. He threw another left hook, countering her once more. Nemu leapt back and missed the punch. He lost his balance as a result. She seized the opportunity when she saw it. He grabbed her leg and drew her in as she rushed forward and kicked him in the right side with her left leg. He gave her a hard knee to the stomach before she could react, causing her to gasp for air. He then forced her to fall hard to the ground by placing his left foot behind her leg. With haste, he released her leg and delivered a hard right to her face. Nemu leapt to his feet and rolled sideways. He skidded a few feet away after she kicked him in the side. He sprang to his feet and rushed forward. Nemu ducked as he threw a wide left, only to be punched in the face. Two Narutos were standing in front of her when she flew back a few feet. The real Naruto reminded him, I said, come at me with the intent to kill, as the two charged ahead. As she evaded their attacks, she forgot about the question of when he had had time to create a clone. She was struck in the side by one attack as she sidestepped the other. As the two Narutos pounded Nemu into the ground, the battle quickly turned one-sided. Damn, she thought, attempting to separate herself from the two Narutos. She was aware that he would truly beat the living daylights out of her if she continued to hold back. Seeing no other choice, she prepared herself for his next assault. When Naruto saw how Nemu's attitude had changed, he grinned. He grinned and remarked, she's finally taking this seriously, as he watched in amazement as she started rapidly spinning her hands. She said in a flat voice, let's continue, shall we? And rushed ahead more quickly than before. She threw a blow at Naruto's face, but he blocked it. Naruto initially believed he had gotten off easy, but then he started to experience severe forearm pain. Leaping back, he glanced at his arm. He could see that Nemu's attack was a drill and that he would need to maintain his distance if he wished to survive. Your taijutsu is excellent, Nemu, Naruto grinned as he took two kunai out of his pouch. But, let's see how you cope with a few futon justice. Nemu asked, futon, but then she sensed a shift in the atmosphere. She noticed the air accumulating around the blades in Naruto's hands as she turned to see what was happening. Futon. Naruto swung one of his kunai and said, wind blades. Nemu swiftly sidestepped when he sensed a shift in the wind. She noticed a wide cut leading toward the tree line where she had been standing. Good reflexes, a smiling Naruto remarked. Nemu just dodged each blow as he continued to send more wind blades her way. Nemu thought, damn, can't get close to him, as she ducked under another blade of wind. After landing, she clasped her hands together. Hado number 4 Byakurai, Nemu said, gesturing to Naruto with 2 fingers. She shot a burst of pale, looking light in his direction, and Naruto watched. He countered with futon. Wind wall after making a few quick hand signs. The wind and the lighting clashed and were repelled. As she attempted to approach, Nemu wondered, how did he counter that? Naruto grinned as he glanced at her. He charged forward, launching his own attack in response to hers. He sidestepped and attempted to kick her in the side when she attempted to punch him in the gut. Nemu did her best to block, but the kick's momentum still knocked her back a few feet. With a kunai to Nemu's neck, Naruto quickly pinned her to the ground after pressing his attack. She blushed as he whispered, "I win," in her ear. Grinning, he stood up and assisted her in standing up. "You did great, now it's Isane's turn." With a nod, Nemu moved to the sidelines. She was upset about losing, but Naruto was a very good fighter based on her experience. He was able to quickly adjust to new situations and come up with solutions. She questioned why her Kido had been blocked so easily and promised to investigate. Izan had marveled at the battle. Even when both were suppressing their actual strength, Naruto and Nemu had fought on an even playing field. As she positioned herself on the training field, she pondered, "I wonder how powerful you really are." "Ready when you are," Izan informed me. Naruto gave a nod. He threw a left hook after lunging forward. Naruto blocked and countered with a right after Izan dodged and attempted to punch him back. During their fight, Naruto observed that Isane's taijutsu was mediocre at best and that she was unable to compete with someone of his level. Leaping back, he observed her. He was simply too good for her, Hakuda, so Izan sighed, grateful for the respite. She chose to see how he would handle children because she knew he was better than her at that. She said, "Hado number 4 Byakurai," and blasted Naruto with lightning. Izan was preparing another spell, Hado number 31 Shakuho, when he sidestepped. A red ball of energy shot in Naruto's direction. Naruto said, "Damn," and sidestepped, only to be snagged by the shockwave. He felt his arms bind together as he stood up. As she said Bakudo number 1 Sai, he turned to see Izan. She pulled out her katana and brought it down on Naruto, who sidestepped. When Naruto noticed that the spiritual aspect of his chakra was binding his arms, he pumped his chakra to release the binding. She thought to herself, "Dang, I should have known it wouldn't hold," as her blade collided with Naruto's kunai. In order to prevent her from performing any more of those odd just you, he pressed his attack and stayed as close to her as he could. Izan knew she couldn't continue for very long because she was growing very tired. Leaping back, she held up her hand. She said, "I yield," and sat down on the ground. With a nod, Naruto took a seat beside her. "Good job," said he. "I was surprised by those odd justice." "That's not just you. They're children," Izan clarified. "What are kiddos?" inquired Naruto, astonished. Izan lay down and said, "Just let me rest. We'll teach you later." To her astonishment, Naruto grinned and lifted her up in a bridal manner. "What are you doing?" As he led her back to the house, with Nemu at his heels, she stumbled. Izan blushed as Naruto grinned and said, "You said you were tired, just being a good friend." As she watched this, Nemu secretly wished she was in his arms rather than Izan, feeling a little envious. The research groups had quickly discovered Nemu and Isane's Zanpakuto spirits and were now keeping an eye on what the two were doing. They had witnessed the battle between the two lieutenants and the blonde who had been with them earlier and were astounded by his abilities, which included the ability to control wind and create copies of himself. However, what most astounded the group was that he appeared to be holding back as well. Despite the fact that both lieutenants were holding back, he was able to make them become serious without even trying. Who is he? He reminded her of Ichigo in terms of fighting ability, but he seemed much happier than her orange-haired friend, so Orihime asked in astonishment. Mayuri grinned broadly and remarked, "I don't know, but it would be great to study him." Urahara agreed, wanting to learn more about his abilities. "I would have to agree with you on that," she said. "I'd prefer to know why he was battling Izan and Nemu. Was it to see who was stronger or to test their strength?" Naneo interrupted. "I really don't know," Urahara replied, "but we won't know till we send someone there." Naneo said, "I want to get them back as soon as possible, so I'll go." "I am glad you feel that way, but it will take time to make another Senkimon to go there," Mayuri said with a smile. "Then we better get started," suggested Urahara. "Pardon me. I want to go as well," Orihime said, grabbing everyone's attention. What? Everyone uttered the same words. Naneo questioned in disbelief. Orihime, what do you mean you want to go to that world? It's too dangerous. I want to help, please let me help, Orihime said, tears streaming down her cheeks. I can't just sit here and do nothing. All I have ever done is nothing. Not when we recused Rukia and Winter War, I did nothing. The others could sense the girl's anguish as they gazed at her in tears. She was sick of being powerless. Everyone gasped in shock as Urahara said, fine, you can go. Orihime questioned in surprise, really? Yes, really, but you have to train first. Urahara nodded. She declared resolutely, I will train hard. He said, good, and turned to face Mayuri. How long till you can get a Senkimon ready? Mayuri stated, at least a month. Urahara stated, then we have a month to prepare. He gave Orihime a very serious look as he looked at her. You are going to be put through hell, you know that, right? Orihime wiped away her tears and said, yes, I know. But I want to help and I will try my hardest to do it. Urahara grinned and said, that's what I need to hear. Let's begin, shall we? Naruto took a seat in front of Isane and Nemu. He examined them and made plans for their training schedule. He had Nemu do a quick workout in the morning, then throw a weapon, and finally he would have her replenish her chakras. He pointed out that Isane needed to improve her taijutsu. She had a solid base, but she needed to find a style that suited her fighting style. He intended to begin by giving her the same gentle workout as Nemu, then move on to weapon practice, reserve building, and finally, helping her create her own taijutsu. Nemu and Isane were organizing their training while he was organizing theirs. He was said to be a versatile fighter who could quickly adjust to new situations. His senses and reflexes were as good as the captain's. Prior to starting him on kiddos, they intended to have him first collect the Riryoku from his surroundings. When the girls nodded, Naruto broke the silence first, saying, okay, I think we are ready to get started. He turned to Nemu and said, now I'm going to give you my evaluation of your current fighting strength. First off, we'll start with Nemu. First off, I have to say you both are well-trained warriors and it was fun to spar with you. She said, okay, and he nodded. He smiled and remarked, first of all, your taijutsu is fantastic. Is it a kiki genki? The way you got your hand to spin like a drill was incredible. Genkai kiki? Isane inquired. It's a bloodline, a gene in your blood that allows you to do things other people can't, Naruto said, grinning. Oh, then no, Nemu replied, it was more of built into me by my father. What is meant by built? Naruto said, growing somewhat irate. As if it didn't matter, Nemu stated, that's exactly what it means. My father changed my body to do things that other people can't. There another bastard out there that does that stuff. Naruto nodded, barely able to contain his rage, and yelled in his mind while picturing a dead snake. Concerned, Nemu saw the rage rising in Naruto's eyes and asked, are you okay? To get his attention, she asked. He dismissed the question with, yeah, just fine, adding, just remembering something I rather not. Oh, Nemu said, wondering why he was angry at her alteration, whether it was because he didn't believe she was human. After dragging Nemu out of her reverie, Naruto said, anyway, back to what I was saying, your taijutsu is great, it's high chunin low jonin level. You have excellent battle awareness after that. However, I question why you chose not to draw your blade. Nemu merely said, my fists are all I need to defeat someone. I have no use for it. I see, he responded. Overall you about a chunin level in skill, but that probably not your true level of skill. How are you aware of that? Nemu inquired curiously. He smiled and remarked, I have my methods. He smiled when Nemu said, sure you do. Anyway, onto Isane. He said, glancing at the girl with the silver hair. We'll start with your taijutsu first. It's mediocre, but you have a good base on which to build, so we can work on that. Both your use of justice and your blade work are excellent. Justice? Wondering what he was talking about, she asked. Those numbered attacks you sent at me, he replied. She said, oh, you mean Kido? Yeah, that, he replied. I have to say you're about the same level as Nemu, but yet again that is not an accurate assessment of your skills. Nemu and Isane gazed at him in amazement. Not only had he correctly assessed their strength, but he also saw that they were concealing their actual abilities, and he was also concealing his own. What does chunin level mean, then? Nemu inquired, having read the shinobi basic but lacking a precise understanding of their abilities. The first level of shinobi is genin, which is made up of rookies who have recently graduated from the academy and joined the shinobi force. Oh yeah, sorry, he said. They typically only know the fundamentals of Justice Academy and what their clan taught them. The next rank up, the chunin, has more experience than the genin and typically possesses more abilities as well. Subsequently, we have the Jonin, who are the most skilled members of the regular shinobi forces and typically instruct the genin. Anbu comes next. They are the special forces. To be the best of the best, they have received extensive training. Kage and Sennin are above them. The most difficult levels to reach are these two. Many people fear them because they are skilled in a wide variety of shinobi techniques. While the Sennin engage in activities outside of the village to defend it from external threats, the Kages govern the villages. Thank you for the explanation, Nemu said. So we're at the Chunin level? That was my assessment, but you were holding back, so you were probably higher, he responded. At what stage are you? Isane inquired. After leaving them without a response, Naruto got up and went to the house. Isane and Nemu sat there in silence until he grinned and turned around, saying, I am a Sennin. What? They both yelled simultaneously. Orihime was in class, but she preferred to train with Urahara for the mission, so she sat at her desk in frustration. Urahara sent her out to buy training clothes and other supplies after they decided she could go, but she hadn't started for 2 days, and she didn't want to be useless any longer. When the bell rang, she hurried out the door, and Uryu, Chad, and Ichigo watched as she zipped out of the room at breakneck speed. What's wrong with her? I wondered, Chad said. I don't know, said Uryu. Ichigo replied, same. Orihime arrived at Urahara's shop, went to the back room, and changed into a purple Under Armour shirt and black sweatpants while the 3 confused boys attempted to understand what was happening. She said resolutely, okay, I'm ready. Let's get stronger. She said, owie, and got up after tripping over the doorframe and falling to the ground as she was leaving the back room. She muttered, let's try that again. And descended to the hidden training area. She noticed Yoruichi and Urahara standing a few feet away from the ladder as soon as she touched the ground. Grinning, Urahara said, welcome back. Are you ready to train? Yes. Orihime firmly exclaimed. Orihime trailed closely behind Urahara as he walked deeper into the training grounds, grinning and saying, good. Now let's get started. He turned to face his new pupil as they came to a stop in a spacious clearing. First things first. We are going to start with strength and speed building exercises, he stated. Now Yoruichi will be helping you on this. Orihime nodded, her eyes resolute as she turned to face the purple-haired beauty. Yoruichi smiled as he glanced at her. Let's start the training started. Orihime said confidently, okay. Orihime nodded and started running after Yoruichi said, first you have to run 30 laps around this clearing. However, after a few feet, she stumbled and got back up. This continued, and after 3 laps, she was covered in bruises, but she continued to run. The laps soon increased, and Yoruichi grinned as she observed Orihime's unwavering resolve. Unfortunately, her body didn't match her heart's will, and she soon passed out after 22 laps. Her body was too exhausted for her to get up. Yoruichi approached her after noticing this. Well done, she told the weary girl, you completed 22 laps, which was more than I had anticipated. Orihime huffed as she attempted to breathe, Ia. Ha. Ha. Ka. Kana. K. Keep it going. With a glance at Orihime, Yoruichi said, no you can't, you need to rest a bit, we have more things to do. Orihime simply lay on the ground for a few more minutes after nodding. Raising herself from the floor, she approached Yoruichi. Orihime began her task after Yoruichi gave the order, okay next give me 60 sit-ups. Orihime was doing exceptionally well in every aspect of her training, which had begun 10 days prior. Her body started to adapt to the strain after the first few days of training, and after 5 days, she was able to finish the entire workout. Yoruichi, who was pleased with her development, had incorporated hand combat into her training. She had forced Orihime to practice each stance 100 times a day after teaching her the fundamentals. She now waited for her teacher to attack while standing in her stance in front of her. Yoruichi said, this is to see if you go it down. She charged forward and kicked Orihime in the side, but Orihime lifted her leg to block. Leaning forward, Orihime delivered a forceful right to Yoruichi's face. Yoruichi threw a knee at Orihime's stomach after dodging it with a head tilt. To gain some distance, Orihime pressed her hands together and pushed off her knee. Yoruichi was on her again before she could settle in. Yoruichi's attacks were mostly blocked by Orihime, who was once again on the defensive, but she was unable to sustain it for very long. She lost her composure and was struck in the stomach, which caused her to collapse to the ground in agony. You need to learn to take a punch like that. Yoruichi sighed as she looked down on the girl. People in a fight won't be merciful and use this to their advantage. Orihime was aware of this, but she chose not to acknowledge it. She was still struggling to breathe. With a sigh, Yoruichi approached the ladder. She said, I see you upstairs. After lying there for a few minutes, Orihime slowly rose from the floor. She stutters a little but moves in the direction of the ladder. As she walked, she told herself, I will get stronger. Izan observed the fight between Naruto and Nemu. He had them spar with him every day since they had begun their training a few days prior. Despite only having been training for a few days, she sighed because she was exhausted. She was never this exhausted, even when she attended the academy. Her days consisted of getting up, eating breakfast, and then meeting Naruto for training in the back. The light workout he had them begin included 30 laps around the training grounds, 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 250 leg lifts, and crunches, but he also had her throw 200 kicks per leg and 100 punches per arm. The next step was chakra training. He had given them each a leaf and instructed them to use a chakra to hold it in place on their foreheads. He instructed them to determine the best way to attract the chakra to their foreheads. With a bowl of ramen in hand, Naruto watched as they initially failed to accomplish it. After 2 days, Nemu received it, but regrettably, Izan did not. Why is this so damn hard? She yelled in exasperation as she watched the leaf fall once more before pouting and sitting on the ground. After noticing this, Naruto approached her and sat down beside her, saying, You get it. You just need to practice. Izan sighed and remarked, That's what I'm doing, but I can't get it to work. After giving it some thought, he said, You just have to draw it out. I want you to mediate with me right now. Izan said, Okay, and assumed her meditative position. After observing her for a short while, Naruto grinned and said, Okay, first I want you to relax and clear your mind. He then continued, Next I want you to focus on looking inward. Try to feel the flow of your chakra through your body. Choose one spot and follow the chakra all around till it comes back to that point. Izan gave a small nod and concentrated. Power, not her resistu, but something else, was coursing through her body. It spread throughout her entire body, something more. She sensed the flow from her head to her feet. She followed her chakra's flow by selecting a location on the tips of her fingers. She felt in control of it as she followed it. All she had to do was concentrate, and it would do as she desired. When she opened her eyes, Naruto was grinning and staring at her. He inquired, Did that help? Yes, Izan smiled and replied. After saying, Great, Naruto got to his feet and said, Try the exercise again and let me know how it goes. Izan nodded, picked up a leaf, focused it on her forehead, felt the flow, and cleared her head. The leaf remained in place when she let go of it. Both Nemu and Izan had become stronger than they had ever imagined in the 2 months since they had entered this world. After the first week, they both became proficient at the leaf balancing exercise, so he had them go on to tree walking. At first, it was a painful experience. They were wide-eyed when he first showed them. When they awoke that morning, they searched for him but discovered a note on the ground instructing them to follow a rope. They found themselves in a clearing surrounded by big trees. They wondered where Naruto was since they couldn't see him when they looked around. A voice from above said, Yo, and when they looked up, they saw Naruto standing upside down on a tree branch, staring down at them. How could he be doing that? Nemu stared at him in disbelief. She was aware that Soul Reapers could hover in midair, but they were never able to adhere to objects as well as Naruto. Isane's eyes widened as she asked, How is that possible? He stepped on the ground and grinned, saying, Now you two are going to try. Naruto, who had surprised the two even more, said, Simple, I just focus my chakra to the bottom of my feet and use it to stick to the surface of objects. Use these to mark your progress and I've been over there sleeping. He grinned and tossed 2 kunai into the ground before turning to leave. The two had been working on the exercise daily since that day. Nemu managed to stay on longer than Izan, despite Izan making it higher. Determined to reach the top, the two looked at one another. Orihime moved through her positions as fast as she could. She had been training for more than 6 weeks, and she was improving as a fighter. By incorporating her shield into her fighting technique, she was able to trap her opponents and halt their movements. While she waited for Urahara to arrive and begin the next phase of her training, she was completing her foundational coursework. He smiled and remarked, Well, it seems that you have improved greatly. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your Yoroichi's help, Orihime said, pausing and grinning at him. Well, I say it now, time to step it up. He laughed and said, We are going to make it so you can make point shields instead of just one huge one. This will allow you to block as well as move at the same time instead of staying in one place. Orihime smiled and said, Okay, before preparing to begin the training. Urahara picked up a crate of tennis balls and walked over to say, That's what I wanted to hear. No, remember the point is to create small shields that block the ball while you are still moving. Yes, she replied, leaping aside as a ball flew by. Soon after she called forth her fairies, they began their training. Naruto grinned as he stood beside Izan and Nemu. After 2 weeks, they were proficient at walking trees. He was pleased with their development and intended to teach them the 3 fundamentals of the academy justice. Nemu thought Naruto was an excellent teacher and was pleased with her development. When they had questions or were frustrated, he was always there to help. He always urged them to recover and never said anything hurtful. Okay ladies, today we are going to learn of the 3 basic academy justice, Naruto said with a grin. It is Kawarimi no Jutsu, or body replacement justice. This will allow you to substitute yourself with something in case you get attacked. Kawarimi no Jutsu, he said after going over the hand signs, and a log took his place. He grinned and remarked, this is good when you need to get out of a jam quickly. He was happy that he had them review the hand signs before they began. Now I want you to try. Both of them nodded, and Nemu chose to speak first. She was covered in smoke after saying, Kawarimi no Jutsu, and going through the hand signs. She was still standing there with a splintered log surrounding her when it cleared. Okay, you put too much power into it, he replied. Shall we try that again? They spent the remainder of the day practicing the just you, but they still hadn't done it correctly. Naruto smiled encouragingly at them as they made their way to the house. You get it, he smiled, it took me a while to learn how to do it, so don't be discouraged. Izan smiled and said, thanks, it's just so hard. Well, it's new to you. Naruto replied, it will take a while for you to be comfortable to use this power, so just keep practicing and you get it. Nemu nodded in agreement as Izan said, thanks Naruto. Happy to be of assistance, he said. Should we eat in or go out? After 2.5 months of starting Nemu's and Isane's ninja training, Naruto stood on his roof and gazed at the stars. He was pleased with their progress but started to wonder when he would begin his own training. They kept telling him that they were still figuring out the best way to teach him, so he let them plan while he worked on his newest edition, Icha Icha. Once he was satisfied with what he had written, he sat down and started to gather nature chakra. In an attempt to trick his blonde host, Kyuubi began sending mental images of Nemu and Izan engaging in highly suggestive behavior with Naruto during this time. Naruto found it difficult to focus as soon as the images entered his head. As he attempted to regain his focus, Naruto said in his mind, stop it you baka.fox. Come on, kid, you know you want to do that, Kyuubi said with a smile as he intensified his attack. Simply acknowledge it, then take action. Kyuubi wasn't finished yet, but Naruto responded, I'm listening to you, and returned to his meditation. I've been here for a long time, so believe me when I say that you should get some as soon as possible. Kid, listen to me, Kyuubi said. When gorgeous women are swarming at you, you're just sitting there doing nothing. Hurry up and jump their bones, man. Frustrated, Naruto shot back, I'm not going to. With a smile, Kyuubi said, but you want to? Naruto replied, of course I want to, and blushed in shame. I knew it. Kyuubi yelled, it's okay kid. All you need to do is go to a few towns over, hit the brothel and just have fun. Naruto responded, I will not, I am not like that. I am not a pervert. Kyuubi smiled and said, say the writer of Icha Icha. Naruto stated, that's different. Sure it is. Kyuubi replied, you write a serious story with plot and only a little smut, but it is very detailed smut. I mean kid, some of the stuff you come up with sound like way too much fun. Naruto yelled back, whatever arrow, Kitsune, and broke the connection. He can't deny it forever. Kyuubi chuckled, and when he does I will have my camera and popcorn ready haha jaha ha 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 ha. With a sigh, Naruto ceased his meditation, he was thinking a lot. He was unable to dispute Kyuubi's assessment that he needed a companion. To spend his life with, not just to sleep with, but the young sage had a cruel life. Despite being the strongest shinobi, he was also the most isolated. He would never be able to find someone to fill that gap in his life. Before long, he was thinking about his 2 new roommates. He began to imagine what his life would be like if he were with one of them. He imagined being wed to Nemu. Her kimono was light purple and covered in blue lilies. They approached a young girl with blue eyes, dark black hair, and facial whisker marks. Grinning, she drew the 2 forward. Come on, she smiled, can you push me, daddy? I want to go to the swings. As he visualized this, Naruto couldn't help but smile because he could see their happy faces. He then imagined that he was with Izan. She was wearing a very fat bathing suit that showed off her body well, and they were holding hands at the beach. It was extremely low cut and silver, reaching all the way down to her navel. He was dressed simply in orange and blue swimming trunks. In front of the 2 ran a small boy with silver hair, blue eyes, and facial whiskers. Holding up a big seashell, he said, Daddy, Mommy, look what I found. Naruto kept switching back and forth between the two, and soon he began to cry. Why was he unable to start his own family? Before long, he was crying silently as he pondered what fatherhood would be like. He turned to see Nemu standing behind him as the sound of footsteps suddenly filled the room. She walked over to him after noticing the tears in his eyes and the loneliness in them. Concerned for the blonde, she sat down beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I heard that you up here and was wondering if you were okay?" she said. In an attempt to contain his tears, Naruto wiped them from his eyes and smiled slightly, telling her, "I'm fine." She worriedly asked him, "Then why are you crying?" With an eye toward the sky, Naruto answered, "Just letting out some pent-up feelings, that all." She questioned, "Which feelings?" He gave her a fake smile and said, "Nothing important." She wanted to know what was bothering the blonde, but she could tell he was trying to be happy for her. She said, "That's a lie." "It that obvious," he said, lowering his gaze. She scooted closer to him and remarked, "You are easy to read. Will you please tell me what's wrong? I want to help." For a moment, Naruto remained silent as he considered telling her. After a few more minutes of silence, he finally responded, "I just tired of being alone. All my life I've been alone. I never met my parents. They died on the night Kyuubi attacked." As she recalled reading about the attack in the history book, she exclaimed, "Kyuubi, oh right, the giant demon fox." As he recounts his story, he says, "Yeah, but what most people don't know is that the fourth didn't kill the Kyuubi, he sealed it inside someone. That person was me." Nemu exclaimed, "You have the fox sealed inside of you, with a start. How could they have sealed something into Naruto that was purportedly among the most potent things in the universe?" "Yeah, thanks to him I was always alone for most of my childhood," Naruto went on. "It was only when I entered the Shinobi Academy did I stop being alone. Soon after I graduate I made more and more friends and even got Ka-san, but I am still alone." "Why is that?" Nemu inquired, turning to face her. Naruto said, "No one can truly love a Jinchuriki." Nemu could tell he was sick of being by himself, but she was at a loss for what to do because she was a modified mod soul with a body that didn't know how to respond. Her body moved on its own as she tried to decide what she needed to do, so she put her arms around the blonde and drew him in close. Even though she had only known him for 2.5 months, she knew deep down that she wanted to be with him and only him. She didn't want to return to the Soul Society and be with her abusive father. She wanted to be with this man in her arms, and she finally said, "You're not alone. You have Isane and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon." "Really?" Shocked, Naruto asked. With an affectionate grin, Nemu leans in to kiss him. "Every word," she said. While initially taken aback, Naruto quickly kissed Nemu back, and the two of them embraced affectionately. Nothing could change the fact that they were together, pure and simple, and that she was his and he was hers. They broke the kiss and looked into each other's eyes. At first, she watched the blonde to learn more about shinobi and their abilities, but as he trained her and Isane, she could see the warmth he gave them. He never yelled or hit them for doing something wrong. He never treated them as if they were nothing. He made her feel like a person, not like an experiment. Nemu looked at Naruto and pulled him close. She felt at peace. No one could hurt her here. Miyuri, couldn't hurt her as long as she was in his arms. She whispered, "I love you. You gave me a sense of identity. My father treated me like I didn't exist before I met you. He would beat me, mistreat me, and even test me." She began to cry as she released all of her suppressed emotions because she felt so alone at the time that she would stop at nothing to stop him. Naruto cradled her in his arms and vowed to kill her father, saying, "I kill him." He looked at his princess and said, "He will never touch a hair on her head again." He was worse than the damn snake and had hurt her merely to see what would happen. "That doesn't matter now," he said, placing his hand on her chin and directing her gaze towards him. "You are here and I won't let anyone take you." He leaned in and kissed her, allowing their loneliness to vanish into the night. As the bell rang for the end of the school day, Orihime was cornered by most of her friends. It had been less than half a day since she finished her training, and she was thrilled with her progress and eager to show everyone that she was more than just good for healing. Her friends had noticed the change in her over the past few weeks and wondered what had happened to give her this air of confidence she now had. She smiled her typical vivacious smile and said, "Hi guys, what's up?" Uryu was the first to say, "We noticed something different about you recently." They all said, "Hey Orihime. We were wondering what was going on," he began. "Well, I am helping Mr. Urahara on a really important project," Orihime said with a smile as he glanced at them. "What is this project?" Chad inquired. "Sorry, I can't," Orihime said, glancing at them. She smiled and pushed past the group, saying, "I'm late, I have to go. Mr. Urahara told me not to tell anyone about the specifics of the project. He said I could say I was helping with the project but I couldn't give out the specifics about it." Her friends looked really perplexed as they watched her vanish down the hall. "Are we going to Urahara's place?" Ichigo asked, getting a nod from everyone. "Then let's go." Later in Urahara's, Orihime was waiting for teachers in the hidden training area once more. Urahara and the other employees soon descended and joined her. "Well, it seems we have reached the moment to see if you're ready to go on this little adventure or not." Urahara laughed and said, "You will be face Junta and Ururu. If you defeat them, you're more than ready to go." "I reject," Orihime said with a nod, and her fairies swooped around her. "Let's do this." As Junta and Ururu approached Orihime, Urahara gave a nod. Ururu stood quietly, waiting for him to finish, while Junta grinned and began to stretch. With a broad smile, Junta declared, "I am the great Junta, can do anything. I am going to beat you so bad." Ururu remarked, "Junta, we hurt her too much. I just wanted to say that." Junta sighed. "I know that." Orihime said, Can we get started?" After saying, "Oh sorry," Junta hurried forward and swung his bat widely. Orihime sidestepped the swing and used her foot to trip Junta. Then, to avoid Ururu's rocket attack, she sidestepped. Orihime continued to dodge and create pinpoint shields to block the ones she was unable to avoid. She hurried over to Ururu and punched him, causing the girl to drop her launcher and step aside. After Ururu's straight punch to Orihime's side was blocked by a shield, Orihime took advantage of the situation and gave Ururu a quick tap on the forehead before turning to leave. Getting agitated, Junta said, "Come on, take us seriously." Orihime said, "But I don't want to hurt you. You are going to have to hurt people if you go," Urahara said. "You can't just tape them on the head and expect them to go down. Life isn't like that, so if you're going you have to show the resolve to do what is needed to survive." Orihime realized he was correct after glancing at Urahara. She couldn't treat them lightly if they got into a fight. It was fight or die. But it wasn't in her nature to harm them, so she couldn't do it. Simply put, Urahara said, "It's either them or you. So choose now. Will you stand by and let other fight, or will you stand up and fight for yourself?" Knowing what she needed to do, Orihime took a stance. Seeing this as the cue to launch their assault, Junta charged in and struck Orihime with his bat once more. Her shield stopped his bat this time before a fist struck his stomach. He flew back a few feet as a result. Ururu began to shoot Orihime with her rockets. Most of them were avoided by Orihime, who blocked the others with her shields. Determined to demonstrate her resolve, she rushed forward. After grabbing Ururu's rocket launcher, she pulled forward, bending the girl over and kneeing her in the stomach. Orihime turned to see Urahara clapping as soon as she heard the sound. He approached his two defeated shopkeepers and said, "Well done, you're ready." She grinned and said, "Thank you." Over the fallen pair, she threw one of her shields and said, "Let me help them." As Orihime led Junta and Ururu, Urahara grinned and said, "It's just fine." He then turned to return to the store. When Izan woke up and saw that Nemu was not in her bed, she wondered where her friend was. The sun was shining through the window. She dismissed it and made her way to the restroom, eager to begin the day. As she switched on the shower, she told herself she must be training. How foolish she was. At the moment, Nemu was nestled into Naruto's chest. They had been in each other's arms all night. The first person to awaken was Nemu, who saw Naruto cradling her. For the first time in a long time, she felt joy as she closed her eyes and leaned into him. Naruto stung after the sun struck his face. Slowly, he opened his eyes and glanced down at Nemu. When he realized she was in his bed, he began to panic, but then he smiled as he remembered the other night. He looked at her and whispered, "My Hime." She responded, "My night," which made Naruto flush. She was still asleep, he believed. Naruto drew her nearer to him and asked, "So what shall we do today?" With a smile, Nemu put her arms around him and said, "Stay like this." He pulled her in close, saying, "That sounds great." Then their stomachs both rumbled. They exchanged glances and burst out laughing. Naruto got out of bed and said, "I guess we might as well get up." However, Nemu pulled him down and planted a kiss on his lips. Before leaving his room, she gave him a kiss and explained, "Now we can get up." With Izan exited the shower and used her towel to pat herself dry. She exited into the hallway and then returned to the restroom. She wondered what was happening as she watched Nemu leave Naruto's room and her friend return to their own room. A couple of minutes later, she saw Naruto emerge from his room, beaming broadly. This smile wasn't his typical one, it was a happy one. After asking herself, what happened between those two, she went back to her room to change. Nemu was changing into her training attire when she walked into the room. Even though she was pasted, she couldn't help but notice how her demeanor had changed. She appeared more receptive, as though she had discovered something she had long been missing. As Izan observed Nemu, she began to transform. She finally said, "Hey Nemu," drawing the other lieutenant's attention. "Yes, Izan?" Nemu asked, unsure of what was happening. Izan asked, "Are you okay?" which caught Nemu by surprise. "Yes, why do you ask?" Nemu asked, perplexed by Isane's line of reasoning. Izan gathered her thoughts and said, "Well, it feels like you've changed. It's like you found something you've been missing." Before Izan could ask another question, Nemu had already left the room and gone down the stairs. Nemu glanced at Izan for a moment before turning to face their blonde caretaker. She blushed and said, "It seems that way." When Nemu had answered her question, she had seen the flush on her face. After that, she recalled Naruto's smile. She hurried down the stairs after asking herself, have they gotten together? She started to go to the kitchen, but she stopped when she noticed Nemu and Naruto sharing a kiss. As Izan watched the two separate, she exclaimed, "Oh my! Surprise?" he asked with a sheepish smile, the first person to notice her standing there being Naruto. Izan turned around and went into the living room after saying, "I'm sorry," her face flushed. Nemu interrupted Naruto as he was about to pursue the girl with the silver hair, saying, "I talked to her." Then, she followed her friend. Naruto simply nodded and carried on with his cooking. After scanning the room, Nemu discovered Izan sitting on the living room couch, her face still flushed. Nemu sat down beside Izan and said, "I'm sorry you had to find out that way." With a sigh, Izan turned to face her friend and remarked, "It's fine, it was just unexpected. I mean, you have never shown interest in any guy before back home." "They couldn't understand my loneliness," Nemu said, grabbing Isane's attention as she looked at her. "They could never feel what I have felt, they could never feel it." Izan began to say, "Nemu," but she was interrupted. "Naruto has felt the same pain as I have," she stated with tears in her eyes. "He has felt what I have felt, yet he hasn't fallen to it. He stands tall and moves forward, he doesn't let his loneliness control him. There are times when it's too much for him to keep in, but he still pushes forward. He helps me move forward." Soon she begins to cry. "He holds me and makes me feel safe. I felt protected in his arm. He helps me and I love him for it." Love? Izan exclaimed in surprise. Although love was not what she had anticipated, she believed it to be an extreme. Nemu wiped away her tears and said, "Yes, I love him, he makes me whole." Izan gave Nemu a quick glance before embracing her. She said, "I'm so happy for you." In return, Nemu said, "Thank you." Izan said, "I'm just glad you're happy," but she leaned close and asked, "But what about when we have to go back to the Soul Society?" After getting up and moving toward the kitchen, Nemu turned around and grinned before opening the door. "Simple," she said, "I am not going back." When she was done healing Junta and Ururu, Orihime climbed the ladder to the main store. She was shocked to see all of her friends chatting with Urahara as soon as she walked into the main area. "Hi everyone, what are you doing here?" she inquired. Uru stated, "We came because we are worried about you. You haven't been yourself that last couple of weeks." She sat down and asked, "What do you mean?" After giving her a quick glance and placing his hand behind her head, Ichigo said, "We were worried you were in trouble." Orihime said, "I'm fine as you can see." She could see the worried expression in their eyes as she gazed at them. She could take care of herself, even though she knew they all loved her. "Also, Urahara has been telling us about this project you've been helping out with." Uryu replied, "Are you sure it's safe for you to go?" Orihime gave Uryu a look. He gave her the impression that she was defenseless. She said with a hint of rage in her voice, "No, I think I'll be fine, I've been training." "Well, from what we heard about this world it seemed really dangerous," Uryu replied. "I just think it'd be better for you to stay behind and let someone else go." Orihime answered, "I have been training and Urahara say I am ready." As Urahara put it, she has come a long way, she will be fine. Uryu remarked, "Why don't I or Chad go with them?" Ichigo smiled and said, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea." Orihime frowned. She knew that the three men viewed her as nothing more than a helpless damsel when she glanced at them. She yelled, "I don't need your protection," at them. She remained calm despite the three of them staring at her in disbelief. She spat and left the room with tears in her eyes, saying, "I am so tired of being treated like I am nothing but someone to save." She detested this sensation. She detested being angry, but she was unable to remain silent any longer. She had nothing despite the innumerable times they had saved her. Determined to be strong enough to perform the rescue herself, she vowed, "I will show them," and made her way back down to the training area. 3 days had passed since Izan first learned about Naruto and Nemu, and they were all standing outside. Although she was still shocked that Nemu would not return to the Soul Society, she chose not to let it interfere with her training. After a lot of pushing from Naruto, they learned all three of the fundamental academy justice. As she watched Naruto teach Nemu the proper hand signs for the just you he was teaching her, Izan grinned and was thrilled with her development. He was teaching them each a circa rank just you for their individual nature affinities, which they had discovered a few days prior. He was teaching her Doden. Earth wall just you because Nemu was earth. Izan saw a tiny earthen wall emerge from the earth. It was thick but not very tall. Since most people can't even construct a wall on their first attempt, Naruto told Nemu, "Good job." Nemu smiled and said, "Thank you. I had a really good teacher." Naruto grinned and said, "I'm glad I can be of assistance. Now I want you to practice this while I go teach Izan her just you." Naruto began to approach Izan after Nemu gave him a nod. Observing this, Izan waited for him to position himself in front of her. He said, "Okay, let's get you started," and proceeded to the lake. "We need water for this, so come on." Izan followed, nodding. She couldn't help but notice the same characteristics that Nemu had described to her as she observed the blonde. He was a decent man who was always helpful and never hurt anyone unless it was an enemy. His face was always smiling. She also observed that he constantly checked on their happiness. Recalling their first encounter, Izan blushed at this. Rather than glaring at her, he covered her with his coat and checked on her. Her heart began to race as she watched him. As they paused at the lake, she asked herself, "What is this feeling?" She turned to face the blonde and asked herself, "Do I have feelings for him? I can't. He is with Nemu, but he is such a good person. No, I can't do that." Izan nodded, and Naruto proceeded to demonstrate the hand signs slowly so she could imitate them. Naruto grinned at her and said, "Okay, today we are going to learn Sweden. Water bullet. This is a circa rank just you that allows you to create a large ball of water and shoot it at your opponent at high speeds." Before she was prepared to give it a try, she went over the hand signals several times. After going over the hand signals, she said, "Okay, I'm ready." Sweden. Water bullet caused a tiny drop of water to appear, but it quickly fell back into the water. Sweden. Water bullet, she sobbed, but the water only produced a tiny drop once more. She persisted, but it always came to the same conclusion. Frustrated, she sat down on the ground and asked, "Why can't I get this?" With a reassuring smile, Naruto sat down beside her and said, "It's okay, you can't expect to get it in the first try. I know it just frustrating that it keeps dropping back into the water," she replied. Naruto tried to reassure her by saying, "You are doing great, most people can't even get that much on their first try." Izan looked at the ground and remarked, "You're just saying that to make me feel better." Naruto said, "Stand up," and got to his feet. Izan gave him a look and followed his instructions. Izan followed his instructions and waited for his next command, which was, "Turn around. Now form the hand signs again but slower." Izan nodded and began to make the hand signals when she felt Naruto suddenly put pressure on her back. He put his hand on hers and encircled her with his arms. As she went through the hand signs, he followed her hands. With Naruto so close to her, Izan found it difficult to focus on her work and her heart was racing. "Your finger is wrong," he said softly in her ear while halting her on the third hand signal. "You need to straighten your finger." She followed his instructions and nodded. They repeated the hand signals a few more times before Naruto was confident she had learned them correctly. Izan was saddened by the distance between them as he moved away. He gave her a smile and said, "Now try it." Izan glanced at the water and nodded. She began going over the hand signals while closing her eyes. As she proceeded with the sequence, she could still feel Naruto against her skin. Sweden. Water bullet was the final sign she completed. As she yelled it, a tennis ball sized water ball shot across the lake and struck a tree. Clapping was heard by Izan. When she turned, Naruto was there, and he said, "Good job." She grinned and gave him a hug, saying, "Thank you." Naruto gave her a hug in return and then said, "No problem. Just keep practicing and you have it down in no time." Naruto left Izan to practice after she nodded. Izan felt depressed as she watched him disappear. She was aware that she was in love with him. She started crying and sat down on the ground. She was unsure of what to do because it had just happened. Both Naruto and Nemu were in love with each other. That was something she couldn't interfere with. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she asked herself, "What should I do?" Nemu watched from the tree line the entire time. At the house later, sitting on her bed, Izan contemplated her options. She didn't want to betray Nemu, even though she knew she was in love with Naruto. She couldn't deny her feelings, but she wanted her to be happy. She questioned herself, why is this happening? She didn't see Nemu enter the room while she was having her internal argument. Nemu knew she was in love with the blonde after glancing at Izan. She was initially upset that Izan desired him, but she soon realized that he was a man that any girl would adore. At first, she was afraid and unsure of what to do. Should she keep him for herself or give him to Isane? A scroll had arrived at the house as she considered it. Nemu had read it after picking it up. It appeared that Naruto was expected to re-establish his clan by marrying at least 4 women by the time he turned 20. His brides would be picked for him if he didn't pick them beforehand. After reading the scroll again, she made her way to Naruto's room. As she entered the room, she turned to face the blonde who was lying on the bed. She said, "Naruto," to get his attention. He saw her holding the scroll and asked, "Yes?" "This was delivered a few minutes ago," Nemu began. "Is it true you have to marry at least 4 women by your next birthday?" With a sigh, Naruto turned to face her and said, "Yes, you are registered under the CRA if you are the last member of your clan and have a bloodline. This is an acronym for the Clan Restoration Act, which stipulates that in order to revive a clan, its last member must take several wives. However, you don't have any ancestry, do you?" she inquired. Naruto patted her to sit next to him and said, "Well, yes and no. My bloodline allows us to be the jailer for Biju, but I don't have a bloodline like others. They need my kids to hold the Kyuubi after I pass away because I am the last member of my family." Nemu began to say, but after learning about his upbringing as a Jinchuriki, he smiled at her and said, "It's okay. I don't intend to die anytime soon. I will get them ready for that time. I'll make sure they don't get the same treatment from others as I did." Knowing that he wouldn't let anything happen, Nemu leaned on him and grinned. "So, if you had someone else who loved you, you would be with them?" "If I love them and they genuinely love me, in that case, I am more willing," he stated. This led Nemu to her current situation, where she sat down next to her friend and realized that Izan genuinely cared for Naruto. She didn't want to share him, but they had no other option, so she would rather share him with a stranger. Nemu said, "Izan, may I ask you a question?" "Yes, what is it?" Izan asked, unsure of Nemu's thoughts. "Are you attracted to Naruto?" Nemu inquired. "No. No, I don't," was Isane's stutter, taken by surprise. "According to Nemu, you're lying." I'm not," Izan said, averting her gaze so as not to meet Nemu's. "Please tell me," begged Nemu. As she turned to face Nemu, Izan began to cry. "Yes." Nemu put her arms around her friend and held her. "I don't know how it happened," she said. "I thought it was nothing, but I love him." Nemu gave her a smile and said, "Then you can be with him." "What? I can't have you with him," Izan retorted. Nemu grinned and explained the CRA, saying, "There is a way. However, what if he turns me down?" Izan uttered those words as her fear began to overwhelm her. With reassuring eyes, Nemu said to Izan, "He won't." "Are you certain?" she inquired. Nemu simply nodded and grinned, and Izan gave her a smile in return. "Now come on," Nemu said as she stood up. She said, "What, wait?" But Nemu dragged her down the hallway and into Naruto's room. She opened the door and pushed Izan inside, but before Izan could react, the door was closed and the sound of a key turning filled the air. Izan turned to see Naruto sleeping on the bed, looking so peaceful as he slept. She remained by the door and didn't move, but soon Naruto started to stir, and he slowly got out of bed and noticed Izan standing by the door. "Go on," Nemu said, but Izan began to back up. Nemu wouldn't have any of it. He yawned and said, "Hey Izan," stuttering. "Ha, hello Nato," Izan said. He stood up and asked, "Is there something the matter?" Her face flushed as he approached her. "You're not sick, are you? Your face is flushed." Isane's heart was pounding so hard that she was unable to control it any longer, so she leaned in and kissed him. Naruto was startled and froze, but Izan quickly regained her composure and moved away from him. Weeping, she said, "I'm so sorry." Iya. When Naruto regains consciousness, he turns to face Izan and weeps. He approaches her and embraces her, saying, "It's okay, I was just surprised." But she stumbled and turned to face him. Naruto drew her close and said, "No buts. Do you truly feel that way?" After Izan nodded, Naruto drew her into a kiss, and although she was taken aback, she quickly returned the kiss as Naruto held her close and Izan felt content. Orihime, who detested sadness and helplessness, sat in the hidden training ground with tears streaming down her face. As she attempted to wipe away her tears, she told herself, "I am not helpless, I can help." She sat down beside the sobbing girl, not realizing Naneo was approaching her as she was crying. The words, "It's okay," Naneo tried to reassure Orihime. Orihime sobbed, "They don't think I can do anything without protection. They just worried about you." Naneo replied, "They just want you to be safe." The response from Orihime was, "I know, but I can help, I'm not helpless." "Then prove them wrong." Naneo replied, "Show them you don't need help." Thanks Naneo, Orihime said, nodding and wiping away her tears before standing up. Anytime. Naneo responded, now come on, Mayuri is almost done with the portal, we are heading to the Soul Society soon. Orihime said, okay, let's go, and trailed Naneo over to the exposed Senkinman. Izan was happy that she was with him, but she was a little scared when the Soul Society looked for them. She would miss Captain Unohana, but she was happy with Naruto, and that was all that mattered. Naruto woke up the following day with a yawn, and when he looked to his side, he saw Nemu sleeping next to him. He smiled and turned around to see Izan on his other side. After the kiss, they all got together and decided that it was in their best interests to share. With his head resting on his pillow, Naruto declared, this is going to be a great day. Nemu said, yes it will, which startled the blonde and caused him to jump, waking Izan. She wiped the sleep from her eyes and said, keep it down. Naruto apologized to Haim and kissed her lightly, saying, I didn't mean to wake you. After giving him a passionate kiss with a smile, Izan withdrew and remarked, it's okay. He grinned before being drawn into another kiss, this time with Nemu. After a few seconds, they broke it off, and Naruto grinned broadly as he drew both girls to him. I am the luckiest guy in the world. Nemu cuddled up to him and said, yes you are. Izan said, I second that. So, what should we do today? Naruto grinned. He inquired. Nemu and Izan exchanged a smile and Nemu said, it's time for you to start training. After grinning and getting out of bed, Naruto lifted the two girls and said, let's get going. They both laughed as he made his way to the door. Izan remarked, this is going to be fun. Being the Toad Sage helped because it taught him to draw power for nature, but it was really annoying to keep the Ryastu separate. Naruto sat on the ground in his meditative position, practicing the separation of his spiritual and physical energy. They had been working on it for a few days, and he made progress, but it was still strange for him to use only his Ryastu. Some came from inside him, but it mostly came from the places around him. His forehead twisted as he focused, but it still didn't separate into the two different energies. Nemu and Izan watched him walk over to them and marveled at what he had done. Not only was he drawing out his Ryastu, but he was also making his reserves bigger, but he had no control, so they had to work on that first. He opened his eyes and ruffled his hair in frustration, saying, why is this so damn hard? He then got up, leaving a line of 250 clones working on separating the energies. To their delight, he sat in the middle of the two girls and pulled them close, and they both wrapped their arms around him and cuddled against him. The two of them laughed as he grumbled, that is so hard. Izan smiled and said, you get it. Naruto groaned as Nemu said, you just need to work on your control. He muttered, why is it always my control, which made them chuckle. Nemu said, we work on it. They kissed for a few seconds before parting ways, and then Izan kissed him again, and he grinned. He was content because he had two lovely women who loved him and was learning a new fighting technique. Naruto said, should we go out by Haim's? That would be wonderful, smiled Izan. I am in the mood for some barbecue, Nemu said, nodding. Grinning, Naruto stood up and extended his hand to each girl, saying, shall we go then? Nemu took his other hand and he pulled them to their feet, while Izan took his and said, why of course my good sir. He glanced at his clones. We will be back in a couple of hours, according to him. I want you to keep practicing, and when we get back you will dispel in groups of 10 every minute. Without waiting for a response, he led his Heims to the gate. In the village, many of the villagers turned their heads when they saw Naruto with Nemu and Izan, and many of the fangirls were glaring at them with resentment because they were so close to Naruto, while many of the guys were envious of the blonde for having two attractive women so close to him. Naruto was beaming broadly as they walked together in the direction of the restaurant. As they passed by, Naruto heard someone murmur, lucky bastard. It made him smile. He thought to himself, yes, I am. People shouted, hey Naruto, at them as they were walking. When they turned around, Sakura and Sasuke were approaching them. Hey guys, how are you? Sakura paused in front of the group and asked. Hey Sakura, how are you? Naruto smiled as he asked. I just wanted to see how you've been, haven't seen you in a while, she continued, you haven't been in village much. Glancing at Nemu and Izan, Naruto grinned and rubbed the back of his head before saying, been really busy. His friends take note of this, and Sakura smiles knowingly at him. Really no, she said sweetly, do tell. We were just training and stuff, Naruto remarked, blushing as he recalled his interactions with Izan and Nemu. What kinds of things? Sakura inquired in an attempt to elicit additional responses from the blonde. Stuff, muttered Naruto, flushed. Sakura gave him a slightly too sweet smile as she looked at him. So you guys heading anywhere? She surprised the group by asking. Nemu replied, yeah, we are going to go eat. Sakura pulled Sasuke close to her and said, that's great, so are we. Why don't we eat together? Naruto was about to decline when Izan said, that would be wonderful. The two groups made their way to the barbecue restaurant after Sakura said, great, let's go. Naruto and Sasuke hung back while the girls soon started chatting and laughing. So you going to tell me what's going on, Dobi, or am I going to have to let Sakura pry it out of you? Sasuke replied. Knowing he couldn't hide anything from Sasuke, Naruto sighed and, much to Sasuke's surprise, said, well, I sorta got together with both Nemu and Izan. Sasuke uttered the words, you are with both of them. His voice was surprised. How did that happen? As Naruto candidly stated, I really have no idea, it simply happened. I trained them to be shinobi and acted like my usual self. Thus, I'm clueless. Sasuke simply sighed and shook his head, saying, I just happy for you, bro, you deserve to be happy. Naruto was still as clumsy as a rock when it came to girls, but what guy wasn't? Thanks, Sasuke. Naruto grinned and said, I just need to let everyone know first. When Chan learns, she will lose it. Naruto didn't notice, but Sasuke caught himself saying, I'm more worried about the bee. I mean our friends when they find out. Naruto sighed, yeah, that's going to be a fun time. When Naruto saw all 12 rookies standing in front of the barbecue restaurant, he went pale. Speak of the devils, Sasuke said. When they arrived at everyone, Naruto exclaimed, I am so dead. As everyone greeted him, Naruto grinned and made an effort to hide his nervousness, but he was failing miserably. This is going to be harder than I thought, he told himself. Hey Naruto. How are you? I haven't seen you in a long time. Shoji inquired. He was a prosperous restaurant owner who had married a member of the Akamichi clan and rose to the position of head of the clan. She was now one of the lead interrogators in the IT division and was dating Sai. Yeah, you're a sight for sore eyes, Ino said. Sai, who joined the Anbu and was very successful, said, yeah, you disappeared on us, Dickless. Naruto exclaimed, you're an ass, you know that, Sai. You haven't been seen in months, and we thought you were buried under all the instant ramen you have, Tenten said, approaching him and striking him in the head. Hey, in response, Naruto said, I cut back. Nemu said, yes he has, drawing everyone's attention. And who might you two be? Ino asked, glancing at Nemu and Izan. She inquired. Oh, I apologize, guys. This is Izan Katestu and Nemu Kuratsuchi, Naruto said. After a brief pause, he added, I am also dating both of them. They are from a far-off place, and they have been staying at my place while I have been teaching them shinobi arts. Sasuke was the only one not staring at him in disbelief. What? When Naruto announced this, Kiba and Hinata had already arrived. Kiba then put him in a headlock and laughed, you finally got the girl, or should I say girls. Hinata scolded her boyfriend, saying, Kiba, stop teasing him. He was released by Kiba, who grinned at his girlfriend and said, I was just having a little fun. Sure you were. She said, come on, let's get a table so we can hear all the juicy details. To Naruto's horror, every girl cheered. Why me? As they entered the restaurant, he pondered. They soon found a table big enough to accommodate everyone and placed their drink orders. Naruto was seated next to Nemu and Izan, and everyone was staring at them, waiting for them to reveal how they met. How did it occur, then? Finally, Ino smiled and asked. Izan and Nemu blushed as everyone stared at them. Naruto revealed, well, I think it happened when we started training. I was attracted to them since we first met. So as we started training, I got to know them and it just happened. When Ino remarked, well, that was anticlimactic, everyone fell silent. Although you were telling it, Naruto, I was hoping for something a little better. Hey, Naruto interrupted, but Ino interrupted him. Looking at Nemu, she said, let's hear it from the girls. So, how did you fall for the blonde idiot? I'm not a moron. Naruto sulked. Well, what attracted me to him was his caring personality, Nemu said. Recalling the night on the roof, he promised me he would protect me forever. Nemu and Izan laughed at his antics. Ah, all the girls said simultaneously, causing the guys to sigh. Did you really say that, dude? Kiba inquired. Naruto grinned and turned to face Nemu, saying, yeah I did, and I meant every word. He gave Nemu a cheek kiss, which caused the girls to gasp once more. Why can't you be romantic like that? Ino asked, glancing at Sai and giving him a punch to the arm. You suck, Dickless. Sai thought as he glanced at Ino. You had to do that, didn't you? I have to do something equally special now? Izan, how about you? Sakura inquired. Well, Nemu knew I like him, so she locked me in his room until I told him my feelings, she said while blushing. He said he would love me always. Wow. As Izan smiled affectionately at Naruto, all the girls exclaimed, and the guys scowled at their friend before acting. Hey guys, do you mind if I borrow him for a second? Kiba said, getting to his feet and grabbing Naruto. He dragged Naruto out of his seat and toward the front of the restaurant without waiting for a response. Shaking Naruto, Kiba said, dude, you need to stop doing that type of stuff. Why? Confused, Naruto asked. You're being so romantic and all that, Kiba said, that's making the rest of us look bad. Our girls will expect it from us if you do it. Naruto said, you're crazy, and turned to return to the table. Kiba muttered, damn you Naruto, and trailed him back. Orihime was assigned to stay with Squad 4 barracks while they waited for the gate to be completed. She had been helping them heal the injured while the gate was being built, and while she was happy to be able to help, she couldn't get rid of the things her friends had said back at the shop. She hated that they didn't trust her to take care of herself, even though she knew she could help and had trained hard. As she finished healing a patient, she told herself, I'm not weak. Captain Unohana saw that she was upset and made the decision to speak with the girl. Orihime, could you please come to my office for a little while? Unohana inquired, and the girl nodded. Orihime thought, I wonder what the captain wants, and she followed Unohana into her office, where they sat on the couch and sat for a while in silence. Finally breaking the silence, Unohana asked, Orihime, is everything okay? Her voice was worried as she asked. Not wanting to force her feelings on others, Orihime turned away and said, I'm fine. Orihime was pressed by Unohana, who was not buying this, saying, there is something wrong, you can't hide it from me. As Orihime looked at the older woman, she noticed that she was worried about her feelings rather than her safety. I just hate feeling helpless, she finally said, adding, I trained really hard to be able to help on this mission and yet they still treat me like I'm helpless. The girl heard Unohana say, you're not helpless. You help heal people and make sure they're okay. To help, you don't have to be on the front lines. I know that, but I always seem to bet the one who ends up getting captured or slowing everyone down, Orihime said, beginning to cry but still feeling powerless. I feel powerless, that's all. Unohana pulled her into an embrace and said, come here. Everyone feels helpless at times, but it's what we do going forward that counts. Orihime kept sobbing in the older woman's arms, releasing all of her resentment through her tears. Her sobbing eventually stopped, and there was silence. Do you feel better? Unohana smiled as she asked. Breaking away, Orihime nodded and said, thank you. She smiled and said, not a problem, I am here to help. Now come on, let's go get something to eat. Orihime nodded and smiled, and the two of them left the office to go to the cafeteria. At the barracks of Squad 12, observing the movements of the two lieutenants, who appeared to have assimilated well with the locals and were always with the blonde man, Miyuri stood in front of the view machine, wondering what he was like and what abilities he possessed. As he watched Nemu and Isane meet with a large group, he thought to himself, I will have to get them to bring him here. He looked away from the screen to check on the progress of the Senkimon, which was 73% done and would take another day and a half to be ready. He sighed, preferring to go it alone and get the failure and the other lieutenant, but the head captain wouldn't let it happen. Someone bring me the Ryotsu scans of NW, New World, he called, and shortly after, a scan was placed in his hand. Examining it, he noticed that it was lower than in the Soul Society, but that something was also mixed in it. He wondered what it was, and he said, I want another scan run now and focus on identifying the other energy in the air. He then ordered all the lab equipment to run around. The captain's meeting. We are here to discuss the retrieval of Lieutenant Nemu Kuratsuchi and Izane Katetsu, stated head captain Yamamoto, peering out at his captains. Orihime Inoue and Naneo eyes will be sent, he added. Is everyone okay with that? Why do you send the Inoue girl, sir? As he emerged from the line of captains, Squad 8 Captain Kiraku remarked. She volunteered for the mission and I was informed by Urahara that she is more than prepared to go, the captain in charge stated. With a nod, Kiraku said, but wouldn't it be better to send in another lieutenant, they have more experience in battle. I understand your concern but she is going, Yamamoto replied. Her powers will be needed if something goes wrong with the mission. After saying, I understand head captain, he moved back in line. Does anyone else find this problematic? Yamamoto asked. No one stepped forward. Then this matter is settled. By tomorrow Inoue and Eyes will be heading to NW to find Lieutenant Kuratsuchi and Katetsu, dismissed. With smiles on their faces, Naruto and the girls were leaving the restaurant. The majority of the days had been spent in laughter. When Naruto was younger, Nemu and Izane enjoyed hearing about him and giggling over many of his antics. Nemu particularly enjoyed the one in which he painted the Hokage monuments' faces. The three of them strolled around the village, observing the sights and sounds. As they walked, he put his arms around each girl and asked, "So my Himes where to next?" "I don't know," Izan said, leaning closer. "I'm happy as long as I'm with you." After giving it some thought, Nemu turned to face the other two and said, "I would like to speak with the Hokage." This made Naruto a little alarmed. He said nervously, "You want to talk to Ka-chan, but she might be busy." When Nemu saw this, she grinned and thought, he's scared what she will do to him when he tells her. Nemu kissed Naruto on the cheek and said, "I just want to talk to her about something important." "It will be fine," Nemu said. He stated, "What that?" Nemu smiled at him and planted a kiss on his lips before saying, "It's a secret." With the hope that he wouldn't wind up in the hospital by the end of the day, Naruto said, "Okay, let's go see Ka-chan." At the Tower of Hokage, sitting at her desk, Tsunade completed a pile of documents. She signed the final document with a sigh of relief. She smiled and said, "Yeah, no more paperwork time for sake." Then she heard someone knock on her door. She uttered, "Yes," as her hand crept closer to her sake draw. Tsunade grinned in relief as Shizune said, "Naruto and the girls are here to see you." She took a bottle out of the drawer and said, "Send them in." "Hi Ka-chan. How are you today?" asked Naruto as they approached her desk after Shizune nodded and Naruto, Nemu, and Izan entered. "I doing fine Naruto," she replied with a grin, "just finished the last of my paperwork and now going to drink my sake." He said, "Of course you are," which caused Tsunade to glare at him. She asked him, "So what brings you here today?" He hadn't been in for at least 3 months, and he had a lot of high-level missions to complete. He let Nemu take the stage after saying, "Nemu would like to talk to you about something." "So what can I do for you today?" Tsunade asked, turning to face Nemu and wondering what she wanted. Nemu opened her mouth to say, "Well, Lady Hokage," but Tsunade raised her hand. Nemu nodded when she said, "Just call me Tsunade, I'm off the clock." "Well, Tsunade, I wanted to know if Izan and I could become citizens of Konoha." Tsunade raised an eyebrow in response to Nemu's question. "It is depending on your reason," she stated, emphasizing that any dishonest behavior would result in suffering. Nemu said, "Well," and blushed as she looked at Naruto. When Tsunade saw this, she turned to face her son and asked, "Naruto, is there anything you want to share with me?" she said, causing Naruto to become rigid. Well," he said, attempting to phrase it. "Come again," Tsunade said, not understanding what he had said, while Izan and Nemu were flushed. He reiterated, this time with greater assurance, "I want to make them happy. I said I love both Nemu and Izan." After a few moments of silently staring at her son, which made him fear that she would kill him, Tsunade suddenly drew him into a bone-crushing embrace and exclaimed, "I am so happy for you. I thought you never get a girl and end up like the pervert," she said, giving him a hug. "Who is the pervert?" As Naruto began to turn blue from the lake of air, Nemu and Izan pondered. Naruto stammered, "Ka-kana can't breathe," and Tsunade finally saw and released his hold, allowing him to breathe again. The girls shivered as Tsunade glared at Nemu and Izan, saying, "You better treat my Naruto right or you're going to regret ever stepping foot in this village." "We will never hurt your son," Izan replied. "I love him with all my heart. He saved me from my loneliness," Nemu remarked. With a smile on her face after hearing these responses, Tsunade went to her desk and took out 2 pieces of paper, saying, "Fill these out." She then gave them to the girls. "What are these?" Izan inquired. With a smile, Tsunade said, "Citizen registration forms." On top of the Hokage monument later Onna standing atop the 4th Hokage's head were Naruto, Nemu, and Izan. Naruto grinned as they observed the sun setting. He grinned as he glanced at the 2 girls standing beside him, then released them and clasped his hands together, declaring, "I am the luckiest guy in the world. Nemu Kuretsuchi and Isane Katetsu are amazing," he exclaimed. Nemu jumped when he pulled her into a kiss, which he broke before doing the same to Izan. Nemu gazed lovingly at the blonde, who had finally found happiness. "I adore Naruto Uzumaki," she grinned and yelled. When Izan heard this, she grinned and said, "I also adore Naruto Uzumaki," she yelled. "I love them and I won't let anything happen to them." Naruto grinned and drew them near to him. "I will protect my Himes." After saying, "I will love you forever," Nemu embraced him. Izan said, "So will I," and she also cuddled up. While the villager below pondered who was yelling as the words were lost to the wind, they stood together and watched the sunset. The following day after they got home, Naruto's clones were dispelled, allowing him to use Ryotsu correctly and begin learning Kidos. He got out of bed, left the girls sleeping, and went outside, where he found his favorite place to meditate and sat down. He began to gather nature chakra and practice spreading the two energies, and while he was doing so, he felt the familial pull of the Kyuubi and entered his mindscape. As he stood before the cage, he asked, "What do you want, Fuzzball?" Grinning, Kyuubi said, "Oh, just to congratulate you on getting together with those two sleeping in your bed." Naruto sat down and said, "Whatever, Fox." With a perverted laugh, Kyuubi remarked, "I mean, you're finally going to be man. You have two of them to enjoy yourself with." Arrow. Kitsune. Naruto uttered those words while gazing at the fox. Kyuubi retorted, "I'm just telling the truth. Come on, who wouldn't jump their bones?" Naruto answered, "I hate you so much right now." They sensed another presence entering the room before they could carry on the conversation. What the devil? While Kyuubi had its tail out, poised to attack, Naruto pondered and got to his feet, ready to attack. "Aside from us, who in hell could be in here?" Naruto inquired. "You're asking the wrong fox, kid," Kyuubi remarked. All of a sudden, they were surrounded by a bright light. "What on earth is this?" With his eyes shielded from the light, Naruto uttered those words. "Damn it." Kyuubi wrapped its tails around himself, forming a barrier. The room was suddenly filled with a female voice that said, "I mean you no harm." "Then dim the fucking lights." Kyuubi yelled. Naruto, "Yeah, what Fuzzy said," answered. "In due time," she replied, "but for now I have come to say I will be there in your time of need." "What are you saying?" Naruto inquired, but the light quickly went out, leaving him and the fox alone once more. "How could that have happened?" Naruto asked, surveying his surroundings. Kyuubi remarked, "Kid, I have no idea." With a sigh, Naruto left his mindscape, unaware of what had just transpired. The voice grinned to herself as he made his way to the house, knowing that she would soon be by his side, assisting him in defending his priceless people. At home, a pan full of cinnamon rolls was being pulled out and placed on the counter by Naruto, who was wearing only pants, leaving his top completely exposed, when Izan woke up to the sound of cinnamon in the air. She scattered and looked around, but he wasn't there. He jumped when she said, "Smell wonderful." "Hello, hon," he said as he approached her, "how was your sleep?" She pulled him close and said, "Of course," adding, "I always sleep well with such a good teddy bear." He said, "Well, I'm glad I can be of service," and gave her a passionate kiss in return. Izan put her arms around his neck and gave him a deep kiss, but they broke it after a short while, and Naruto went to get a cinnamon roll. "Do you want some?" He smiled and asked Izan, who was leaning against the island and looking hot. Izan took a bite out of Naruto's fingertips and let her mouth rest on his fingers, then slowly withdrew and gave him a seductive smile. "I would love some," she said, and Naruto broke off a small piece and fed it to her. Delicious. As Kyuubi watched with a pervert chuckle, Naruto blushed, broke off another piece, and fed it to her again. Before long, the entire roll was gone, and he was kissing her, which made him more aroused because she tasted like cinnamon. He's almost there, he told himself, speculating about Naruto's next move. They parted when they heard a knock at the door. "No." As Naruto hurriedly put on a shirt and made his way to the door, Kyuubi cried. Izan simply nodded when Naruto said, "I'll be right back." As she went to the pan to grab another cinnamon roll, she sighed and thought, and we were just getting to the good part too. An Anbu was standing there when Naruto opened the door, and he said, "Naruto, Lady Hokage has requested your presence in her office as soon as possible." The Anbu nodded and vanished in a shunsen. Naruto sighed. He had hoped to spend a fun day with Nemu and Izan, but duty called. He entered the kitchen to find Nemu and Izan standing there. "Thanks for the info, I'll be right there," he said. "Who was it at the entrance?" Naruto sighed in response to Isane's question. "It was an Anbu," Naruto sighed, adding, "I have to leave because Ka-chan wants me in her office for something." Nemu approached him, planted a kiss on his lips, and said, "Hurry back." Nemu was replaced by Izan, who grinned and said, "Come back soon because we need to finish what we started this morning." After blushing and grinning, Naruto said, "I'll be as quickly as possible." He then went upstairs to change. The office of the Hokage. As he stood before Suande, Naruto pondered her desires. "Jonin Uzumaki," she replied, "I have a B-rank mission I need you to take." He said, "Yes ma'am," and pondered the nature of the mission. A group of 5 B-ranked missing nin are located in an Autuka town close to the Earth country border. Suande commanded, "Go take them out." Naruto nodded, then leapt out the window, using a Hashane kunai to swiftly return to the house, where he saw Nemu and Izan cleaning the kitchen. "It will be done, Ka-chan." He smiled and said, "I'm back, Himes." They approached him and embraced him. So, what was Tsunade's desire? Nemu inquired. I have a B-ranked mission I have to talk. He responded, I'll be gone about a week. They gave him a worried look and asked, Are you going to be okay? Isane inquired. I am an SS rank, and they are only a B-ranked missing. Nin. I'll be fine, he said. I'm alright. Holding him close, Nemu said, just be careful. Nemu's fear vanished as Naruto lifted her chin and gazed into her eyes, saying, I will come back to you, I promise. He then gave her a passionate kiss, and she knew that he would return alive and well, no matter what. He smiled and said, I got to get my stuff, but I will be fine. They nodded and watched him open the weapon locker, taking out his traveling scrolls and placing them in the holders on his legs, making sure he had enough shuriken and kunai to last, and then returning to the living room, where Nemu and Isane sat on the couch and watched him enter. As he walked towards them, he said, I got to go. But first, he grabbed Isane and pulled her into a passionate kiss, kissing her for a few moments before breaking away. That one was for safety and this. He grabbed Nemu and kissed her with the same intensity as he did Isane. When they broke away, he leaned in and whispered in her ear, that was for luck. Nemu and Isane watched him vanish into the distance as the three of them made their way to the village gates. All they could do was pray for his safe return. In front of the barracks of Squad 12, Nanao and Orihime prepared to set out on their mission to save Nemu and Isane. Orihime, are you prepared to leave? Nanao questioned the girl next to her. Orihime remained silent, unsure but prepared. I am, she said at last, her confidence faltering. They entered the barracks and found Captain Mayuri waiting for them after Nanao said, That's all I can ask for. With his trademark eerie smile, he said, So glad you could join us. Orihime simply nodded when Nanao said, Whatever you say. He said to the two, Good, follow me. They then went inside the barracks and stood in front of the view machine. I can't open up a Senkimon in the village due to a barrier around it, and the closest I can get you is about a week's travel away, he stated. What's the reason? Orihime inquired. He produced a set of lieutenant badges and said, I really don't know, adding that, all the test had the gate open at an area not near the village, but we should dwell on the matter. You will need these for us to open another Senkimon, Mayuri said. You must travel from the village for at least a week. Nanao said, We understand, and Mayuri nodded before moving aside. He smiled and said, Have a safe trip. As she prepared to enter, Orihime approached the Senkimon and watched as the door slowly closed behind her. After traveling non-stop for 3 days to get to Aotuka town, Naruto stopped at one of the inns and rented a room. He was exhausted from his non-stop running and wanted to sleep, but he forced himself to stop because he needed to review the missing nin and what they could do. He opened his jacket and took out the mission scroll, which contained the details of all 5 missing nin. Ichika Yamato, a chunin from Iwa with a moderate bounty on his head, was wanted for the kidnapping and rape of over 10 women. He had dark, spiky black hair, green eyes, and appeared to be constantly covered in dirt. He was skilled in decent kenjutsu and had a broad understanding of Duden jutsus. He was also known for his perverted morals and would get a girl if he wanted one. Sukein Ordaka, another chunin of Iwa, came next. He was taller than Ichika, had brown hair and eyes, and wore the typical chunin vest and black pants. He was wanted for defection of duty and murder of a superior officer. He was a taijutsu master who could take on Rock Lee, the second green beast of Konoha, head.to. Head. He also used a number of defensive jutsus. Sena Kuraguchi, a chunin for the Iwa, came in third. She was infamous for her use of genjutsu and was known to kill her opponents before they realized they were trapped in an illusion. She had long, silky black hair, hazel eyes, and a very attractive smile, and she always wore a tight, fitting kimono to show off her ass. Her other skills were mediocre, with the exception of her seduction techniques. She was wanted for the murder of a nobleman who attempted to force her to marry him, and she was a flirt who liked to spend time with strong men, even if they were from a different village. Following her was Haro, a short, black-haired man with a heavy build and samurai armor. He was wanted for killing one of the Earth Daimyo's guards and enjoyed eating, but he was also frequently seen close to restaurants. Last but not least was Hantaro Kusuki, a chilly leader who had led the group for a long time and had prevented them from being taken out. He was tall, had long brown hair, and had dressed in the typical Jonin outfit. He was very intelligent and well known for his traps, and he was wanted for the attempted assassination of a nobleman and his family. As he finished reading, he closed the scroll and thought, well, at least this might be fun. He lay down to sleep on the bed, but his stomach growled, telling him it was time to eat, so he sighed, got out of bed, and left his room. When Orihime emerged from the Senkimon and turned to look around, she noticed Nanao waiting for her by a tree. Are you prepared to begin the mission? Orihime nodded when she asked, and the two of them proceeded to the road they saw at the edge of the trees. They traveled in silence until they arrived at a town, which was named Autuka Town. They were fortunate that this world used the same kind of money as the Soul Society, so finding a place to stay wasn't a problem. Orihime sat on her bed, wondering what they would do next, and Naneo told her to stay close to the inn while she figured out how to get to the village with the faces on the cliff. She sighed, but her stomach began to growl. Naneo had left her some money so she could eat. She said to herself, might as well, and took the money before leaving the room and going out into the street. She left the inn and searched for a place to eat, walking down the street until she found a ramen stand. She went inside and saw a tall, blonde man seated in one of the chairs, so she took the one next to him and looked at the menu. She turned to see a big pile of bowls by his side. Perhaps I ought to ask him? She tapped him on the shoulder and thought, pardon me? Getting his attention, she said, can you assist me? Orihime blushed as he turned to face her, his handsome face and penetrating blue eyes the most striking feature of which were the whisker like lines on his cheeks. What can I do for you? He uttered those words. I was wondering what ramen would be good to get, Orihime said, attempting to conceal her blush as she looked down. That is a tough one, the man remarked after giving it some thought, but in the end, ramen is the food of the gods. Orihime said, yes, it's good. I like to add pepperoni, chocolate, and wasabi. The man examined her for a moment before saying, that sounds good. He smiled and added, I might have to try it sometime, but unfortunately we don't have any of that on hand, so unless you're on a diet, I would recommend the pork ramen. No, I'm not. She smiled and said, I think I understand. She placed her order and turned back to the blonde, saying, thank you, He smiled and said, oh, I see. I haven't introduced myself. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm a Jonin from Konoha. Orihime. I am Orihime Inoue, she declared. Smiled, he said, it's nice to meet you, Orihime. She answered, same to you, Naruto. As soon as Orihime's order arrived, they ate in a relaxed silence. Naruto ordered 3 more bowls of miso ramen and began gorging himself, which made Orihime laugh because she had never seen anyone eat so quickly. When he heard her laugh, Naruto stopped eating and asked, what's on my face? He inquired as to why she was laughing. Orihime continued to laugh, and Naruto soon joined in, but he couldn't help but laugh because her laughter was so contagious. They soon stopped laughing to let their lungs fill with air, and he grinned as he turned to face the girl seated next to him. I have no idea why we were laughing, but it was fun, he stated. Naruto grinned as he watched Orihime nod and smile. Yeah, it was. Orihime glanced at the blonde, then realized it was time, and said, I have to go. She got up and hurried out of the ramen stand. He ordered another bowl of ramen and told himself, it's always nice to meet someone new over ramen. Returning to the room when Orihime entered and saw Naneo emerge from the shower, Naneo grinned and said, good you're back. Orihime said, yeah, I was talking and I lost track of time. After giving her nod, Naneo began getting dressed and sat down on the bed, gesturing for Orihime to take a seat across from her. Orihime sat down and gazed at the elderly woman, wondering what she would like to discuss. When Orihime nodded, Naneo turned to face her gravely and said, okay, I found out where the village is and what it is called. It's to the south of this town and is called Konohagakure, Konoha for short. Orihime caught Naneo off guard when she said, oh, so that where he is from. Who is from where? She questioned the girl with the orange hair. Oh, his name was Naruto and he said he a Jonin from Konoha, Orihime replied. I met him at the ramen stand I was eating at. Naneo gazed at Orihime, wondering if meeting him was a complete coincidence or if she was very fortunate. Did he tell you anything about the village? Naneo inquired in the hopes that she would at least learn something from the man. Orihime responded, not really, we talked about food most of the time. Naneo sighed and said, anyway we will be heading that way in the morning so I suggest you get some sleep. Orihime nodded and quickly finished getting ready for bed, noticing that Naneo was already asleep. She made a promise to herself that she would be helpful on this mission and not a burden to anyone, so she gathered her courage, smiled, and got ready for what was ahead. The following morning, Naruto was rested and prepared to defeat some missing nin. After gathering his supplies, he left the inn and went into the forest to locate his target. However, upon reviewing his order, he discovered that he was supposed to take Senna alive in order to allow her to return to the village because of false pretension. As he ventured farther into the forest, he thought to himself, well, that makes my life easier. He first glanced around before going over some hand signals. Kachiyose no jutsu, he yelled, and a dog-sized toad wearing a vest emerged. The toad remarked, you called Naruto. Sama, Naruto answered, "Hey Tracker Toad, I need you to check if you can locate a campsite here. I have to locate missing.nin quickly because I'm hunting them." With Naruto at his heels, he hopped through the trees and said, "No problem." After a few hours of traveling through the forest, the Tracker Toad discovered an abandoned campsite. He glanced around and said to Naruto, "They were just here." He glanced up quickly and said, "They're heading south. They're ahead by roughly half a day." They started after their targets after he said, "Then let's get going." A few hours later in a clearing by the road, the missing.nin had paused for a rest. "What is the reason behind our return to Fire Country? I mean, we have a higher chance of running into Konohahunter.nin, Senna said, leaning against a tree. "Shut it, Senna." Hantaro replied, "We're heading towards Demon Country and the fastest way is through Fire Country." As a net of ninja wire wrapped around the tree's trunk, Senna humped and took a seat next to it, but she soon left it behind. "Stop it, Ichika, I'm not going to sleep with you." Ichika chuckled eerily and said, "Oh come on, it will be tons of fun, ha 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 ha." Senna approached Hantaro and shook her head, saying, "He's going to catch us, so why can't we kill him?" Hantaro looked at Ichika and remarked, "He's a good fighter. Ichika, stop torturing Senna. You'll enjoy yourself when we get to Demon Country." Ichika said, "All right," as he picked up his net, "but that means Fatty doesn't stop snacking." As he ate Pocky, Haro said, "Hey, don't call me fat." Ichika walked toward the road and said, "Let's go already, whatever Fatty." When a kunai suddenly flew out of the trees and in front of them, Hantaro said, "Fine," and motioned for them to begin leaving. A yellow flash then appeared, and a young, blonde man with a toad by his side stood in front of them. "I'm sorry, but you won't be heading anywhere." He raised his hand. "No, please come quietly, I rather not have to hurt you." Ichika shouted and made a hand gesture, saying, "Like you can hurt us." "Doden. Earth spikes," he called, slammed his hands on the ground, and sent a dozen large spikes of earth at the blonde, who simply smiled before vanishing in a red flash. After saying, "Damn, it's the second yellow flash," Hantaro stood ready and thought, "Damn, with him after us we are as good as dead." He yelled, "Everyone scatter," and everyone set off in different directions. Senna went in the other direction. Sukain and Haro stood prepared to fight, and Ichika and Hantaro fled down the road. "I am surprised," Naruto replied. "I thought you would run like the rest." He was met with a smile from Haro, who said, "I am Haro, Kenjutsu Master, I never lose." Saying, "I never back down." Sukain, "I don't either," Naruto said as he charged the two, but Sukain blocked his punch. Haro then tried to cut Naruto's head off, but he broke away from him and threw a kunai at them. They dodged to the side, and Haro charged Naruto, who easily ducked the attack and countered by punching the round man in the stomach, causing him to gasp for air as he flew back from the force of the punch. Sukain then entered and covered his partner, attacking Naruto with a combination of kicks and punches, which put Naruto on the defensive. Sukain rolled across the ground and flew back, but as he slowly stood up, he felt the broken ribs against his insides. "Damn," he said, and Haro saw this and attacked, hoping to give his partner time to heal. Naruto avoided his blows and stayed out of range. Naruto dodged the attacks and said, "I have to say you guys are giving me a workout," but he also said, "But my orders are to take you out." Naruto vanished in a flash and then reappeared next to Haro, holding a kunai in his hand and slitting his mind rapidly. He then glanced at Sukain and threw a kunai at him, embedding it between his eyes. "2 down, 3 to go," he said, swiftly removing their heads and burning their bodies before vanishing in a flash. Orihime was awestruck by the abundance of trees and animals in this world. Back home, they had only a park, not a vast forest like this. Naneo and Orihime were traveling down the road with traveling packs on their backs, having recently left Aotuka town and headed south. She remarked, "This is a beautiful place." Naneo nodded in agreement. As she observed birds soaring overhead, she replied, "Yes, it is." This world seemed so peaceful, but Naneo couldn't help but feel that something evil was lurking around, so she wondered why they didn't see anyone else. Lack of other travelers made her nervous. When she saw 2 men running down the road, she thought, "I don't like this." They were going very fast, but one of them slowed down when he saw Naneo and Orihime. They passed one another, but one of them stopped. He turned to follow Naneo and Orihime, saying, "I wonder how the orange-haired one would scream." The other man tried to stop his friend by saying, "Ichika, don't we have to get away, he coming." Ichika dismissed him. He threw his net at Orihime, saying, "Well, if I'm going out, I'd rather go out playing with her." Naneo heard the net spinning in the air and swiftly drew her blade, severing it in 2. Ichika was unfazed and charged forward, but Naneo blocked it and pushed him back. She ordered, "Leave us be." Ichika simply laughed. When Naneo blocked the blade and was struck in the face by a fist, he rushed past her and attempted to grab Orihime, but she grabbed his arm and flipped him over her back, sending him crashing to the ground. Now this is more like it. He yelled and charged once more. He stood up, grinned, and said, "Oh feisty. Just how I like them." He charged her, but Orihime threw him again. This time, he was ready, but he didn't anticipate that she would punch him in the face. Orihime said, "Pervert," as she stood prepared. Hantaro watched the fight and made the decision to grab Ichika and flee, but the girl in the black dress stopped him before he could get to him. She attacked, saying, "I won't let you help your friend." Hantaro ducked under the blow and leapt back. He said, "Damn it," and fled into the trees. Naneo contemplated following him, but she knew he had to be stopped, so she did. The fight between Naneo and Hantaro as he set his traps, Hantaro merged with the trees. He said, "Damn women," as he set his final trap. As Naneo stepped into the area, he grinned and said, "Might as well have my fun, she does look like a scream." The first trap was a simple snare trap, but it was a diversion for a net trap, so she jumped when she felt the snare go for her foot, but the net trap activated, and she saw that she was going to be caught and Shunpo out of the way. She attempted to stand in the air, but something stopped her. It seemed that something mixed with the Ryotsu, causing her to fall and land on a branch, only for another trap to activate. She said, "Damn, these traps are annoying." Then she heard someone laughing. "Well, it seems you're pretty good," the individual replied. "But you can't dodge all my traps forever, and when you're caught we going to have a hell of a time." When Naneo heard a paper burning, she looked down to see a piece of paper that said, "Explode on it," on the ground. Her eyes widened as an explosion struck the area where she was standing. Hantaro said, "Got her." However, no charred corpse could be okay after the smoke cleared. Where did she go? He turned and narrowly avoided a blow from Naneo's sword as she said, "It will take more than a simple explosion to stop me." He flipped to the ground and said, "Damn bitch." He made the hand sign, Duden. Earth spikes, which caused 10 spikes of earth to shoot up at her. Naneo dodged some of them and blocked others, but he wasn't finished yet. He had completed another set of hand signs, and he said, Duden. Mud dragon, which sent a huge dragon at Naneo. She said, "Crap," and ducked aside. She then got up and pointed 2 fingers at him. "Hado number 4 Byakury," she said, and launched a lightning bolt at Hantaro, who sidestepped and began to perform another series of hand signals, but Naneo didn't give him time. She put her hands together and pointed them at him. "Hado number 31 Shikaho," she said, and launched a ball of red energy at the man, who rolled to the side and threw a kunai at Naneo. She watched as she moved her head and let it sail past. She watched him smile and said, "You missed." The kunai exploded as he said, "I wasn't aiming for you." Senna was leaning against a tree, waiting for him, which surprised Naruto, who stopped and stared at her in confusion as he ran through the tree to catch up with her. Confused, he said, Hi." Senna gave him a quick glance before approaching him while swaying her hips sensuously. "Why hello," she said, grinning sensuously, "I was hoping you would catch up with me." Even more perplexed, Naruto said, Okay." With a smile, she approached him and ran 2 fingers up his chest, causing him to stiffen. She put her arms around his neck and remarked, "You are so yummy." He blushed and said, "Thank you." However, he was beginning to feel uneasy due to her close proximity. She leaned in for a kiss and said, "Why don't we go somewhere more private to continue this conversation?" But Naruto replaced her with a log. He stood 10 feet away from her and said, wait, adding, "I already have a relationship, so I can't do that." "You certainly can." Naruto shook his head as Kyuubi shouted into his mind. He responded, "Shut up, Arrow." Kitsune. During this time, he was unaware that Senna was approaching him. He saw her close to him as he cleared his head. His back ended up against a tree as he began to back away. Senna said, "She doesn't need to know," as she pressed against him. He became aroused when she whispered into his ear, "I am a very mischievous girl and need to be punished." Grinning, Kyuubi pushed some of its chakra into one of Naruto's jacket's seals. A little black notebook dropped out. Senna picked it up after noticing this. As she picked it up, she asked, "What do we have here?" She began reading after opening the notebook. As she reads, she smiles. "It looks like I hit the jackpot." Naruto tried to back away and ask, "What do you mean?" But Senna wouldn't have it. He slowly nodded in agreement as she said, "You right Icha right. Well, I can be your model for the new one. From what I have read you need some help with tying a girl up. I am more than willing," she said, grinning and pressing herself against him. Kyuubi yelled, "Do it," and Naruto's head ached. After giving her a quick glance, Naruto switched with a log once more. Once more, he knocked her unconscious before she could reach him. He tied her hands and feet with some ninja wire. She slowly awakens as he does this. "I'm ready for my punishment, master," she said, grinning as she feels the wire on her. "So it seems you have already started." With a flush, Naruto turned away and began counting down from 100. Kyuubi was encouraging him while he was doing this. He yelled, "Kid, do it now. Please, you'll never have this chance again." While attempting to ignore Kyuubi, Naruto counted 73, 72, 71, but he was struggling. After giving him a quick glance, Kyuubi began sending pictures of him slapping Senna. "Kid, this is what you want. Give in to the dark side." Naruto yelled, "Shut it, arrow, Kitsune," and turned to carry on counting. Senna looked up at him after he had completed tying her up. She smiled and begged, "Master, don't punish me. I am a good girl. I won't disobey you again." Naruto removed the headband from her arm and used it as a gag by tying it around her mouth. According to Kyuubi, "Kinky. Shut it," he said. Senna attempted to speak, but the gag prevented her from doing so. Her seductive gaze pleaded with him to use her in the upcoming book. 100, 99, 98, 97 was Naruto's first words as he began to walk toward the closest Konoha outpost. Orihime cast a disgusted glance at her assailant. She refused to let him close to her because he was the worst of the worst. A spooky smile appeared on Ichika's face as he gazed at him. He approached her and said, "Come on, baby." Orihime wouldn't have it that way. The black fairy flew at Ichika as she pulled Tsubaki out and gave him a look. "Koden Zanshin, I reject," she exclaimed. He received a minor cut to his cheek after dodging sideways. Blood trickled down his cheek, and he saw it. He smiled even wider at this. He went through some hand signals and said, well, Kitty has claws. "Doden. Earth spikes," he said, sending the spike hurtling in Orihime's direction. "Seden Koshin, I reject," she said as she saw the spikes flying in her direction and erected a big shield in front of herself to block the spikes. She lets go of the shield and gets Tsubaki ready once more. "Tsubaki, I reject," she yelled, sending him hurtling toward Ichika. Ichika charged Orihime after avoiding it once more. He threw a punch at her stomach for her to block with a small shield. He was taken aback, but before he could process it, a fist struck his face. Orihime retreated and readied himself for his assaults as he fell back. Ichika muttered, "Damn bitch." He stood up and gave her a scowl. He yelled, "I'll kill you," and lunged towards her while brandishing a kunai. Orihime stopped him from swinging in down by wrapping her shields around his wrist. He threw a shuriken at her and yelled, "Damn you bitch." As he attempted to break free, she raises her shield to prevent him from releasing his wrist so he can carry on attacking. She sidesteps to avoid being struck as he lowers the kunai. As he attacked, he said, "Stay still." Orihime continued to dodge. She was aware that everything would end if he struck her. She leapt back, trapping Ichika's wrist with two tiny shields. Her shields quickly helped him escape after he struggled. He screamed, "You bitch," as he struggled. Orihime brought Tsubaki back and turned to face her assailant. "Koden Zanshin, I reject," she said, sending Tsubaki hurtling toward Ichika's neck, but she managed to dodge it just in time to avoid hitting him in the side of the head. He flew back to her, and she watched. He yelled, "Why did you change my course?" at her. "I would have ended it." Orihime remarked, "But, I can't kill him." Tsubaki yelled, "You don't have a choice. If you let him live he will try to rape you." She began to say, but she was unable to finish. With a sigh, Tsubaki turned to face the girl. He returned to his clip form after saying, "Do what you want. Remember that if you don't do what is necessary, it will come back to haunt you later." Orihime wondered if Tsubaki was correct as he glanced at the ground. She approached Ichika and gave him a forceful punch to the face. He was punched in the gut after saying, "Ha, doesn't even hurt," until she felt him go limp. Orihime continued to punch him. She took a step back and dropped him to the ground with her shields. In an attempt to locate Neneo, she turned away and went down the street. Ichika started to steer as she vanished down the street. He got up and said, "You're going to get it, bitch." In an attempt to catch up to her and get her to scream, he began to follow her down the street. Despite escaping the blast, Neneo's arm was burned. She scowled as she looked at Hantaro. She waited for the ideal opportunity to attack while hiding from him in a tree's branches. "Come out, girlie," Hantaro callously said, grinning. "I won't hurt you much." After he passed the tree, Neneo stayed silent and waited. When he did, she emerged from hiding and clasped her hands together. "Bakudo #1 Sai," she said, and Hantaro felt his arms snap behind him as if they were being held in place by some force. He yelled, "Damn it, and attempted to sever the binding. Naneo pulled out her sword and aimed it at him. She thrust her sword at him and said, "Die." As he saw the blade fly in his direction, Hantaro pumped chakra into his legs, enabling him to leap over it. He kicked Naneo in the shoulder as he descended, causing her to stumble back. He tries to break the invisible bindings as a result of this. After a short while, he broke it by pumping chakra into his arms. While searching for her, he remarked, "That was a nice little trick there, girlie, but it won't work a second time. If low-level kiddos won't work, I have to go higher." Naneo grinned despite knowing this. "Bakudo number 30 Shidotsu Sansen," she said, drawing a triangle with her hands. Hantaro is pinned to the ground as the triangle's 3 points strike his body. He yelled, "Damn it," and attempted to escape, but was unsuccessful. Naneo lunged forward, piercing his chest with her blade. She pulled out her blade and said, "Rest in peace." Hantaro coughed up blood while grinning. His body began to glow as he said, "You as well." He suddenly exploded, knocking Naneo unconscious as she flew into a tree. While strolling along the road, Orihime noticed a small rest area. Her feet were beginning to ache from all the walking, so she let out a sigh of relief. When she arrived, she took a seat on one of the benches. She began to rub her feet after removing her shoes. As she rubbed her feet, she told herself, "That feels better." She was unaware of the eyes staring at her the entire time. Ichika chuckled softly, not wanting to draw her attention to himself, and said, "I'll get her." Orihime sighed as she finished putting her shoes back on. She settled in and remarked, "I might as well wait here." She heard the trees rustling as she calmed down. Hands on her head, poised to release her fairies, she glanced around. Suddenly, a kunai flew directly at her from the trees. She blocked it and let her fairies go. She was prepared for the next assault. Soon after, she was hit by another kunai rain, which caused her to sidestep and destroy the other people. "Oh, I can't wait to taste you," a voice said through the trees as a spooky laugh soon filled the air. "All you have to do is bleed." The air was soon filled with a constant flow of shuriken and kunai. The majority of the attacks appeared to be coming from all directions, but Orihime managed to dodge and block them. She deflected many of them, but she was struck by a kunai in the leg, which caused her to fall down in agony. Once more, laughter filled the air as the volley of weapons ceased. The voice said malevolently, "Is hurt, such beautiful blood." She swore, "Soden Kishin, I reject," and tended to her leg as soon as she could. As soon as she finished, the assault of weapons resumed. She dodged as best she could again, but she was getting weaker after being struck by multiple kunai and shuriken this time. She was hit on the right side by him. She was about to heal herself after collapsing in agony when a hand closed over her mouth. Orihime turned to face him, and the Ichika said, "Oh no, I like you this way so much better." She thought, "Help me," as the man above her burst out laughing. Naruto had dropped Senna off and was walking down the road. All he wanted was to forget what had happened, so he shook his head. As he walked, Kyubi remarked, "Kid, you know you wanted to do that." As he went down the street, he answered, "Not talking about this." Kyubi said, "Come on Kit," but was interrupted before he could say anything more. Naruto drew a kunai after hearing a laugh. As he got closer to a rest area, he noticed Ichika standing above a girl. Naruto threw his kunai at him and began to run. Ichika sidestepped when she noticed the metal glint. He turned to face Naruto and exclaimed, "Wow, through that? Oh, it's you, can't you leave me be, just go away." With a hint of rage in his voice, Naruto stated, "I'd rather not." Ichika saw the first signs of redness in Naruto's eyes. Naruto's hair grew longer, his hands turned into claws, his whisker marks darkened, and he developed fangs. "There is one thing I hate more than traitor, and that's rapist. Prepare to die." A clawed hand landed on his neck, and Ichika watched in horror. The claws separated his head from his body by tearing through his neck like paper. Naruto cast a hateful glance at the deceased man in front of him. "That's what you get," Naruto said, turning to face his victim. What shocked him the most was that it was the girl from the Outooka town ramen stand. He saw the fear in her eyes as he slowly knelt beside her. Orihime was terrified after seeing Ichika evade an unexpected blow and get to her feet while observing his assault. She was in too much pain to understand what they were saying. She saw Ichika attacked and his head severed by a red blur. The assailant then approached her, and she watched. As he knelt beside her, she noticed red eyes with slits in them and thought, "I'm going to die." Instead of seeing her death in these eyes, she saw only concern. When she finally got a clear view of him, he asked, "Are you all right?" The man from the ramen stand, Naruto, was there. She saw his eyes change from red to blue again. She noticed that he was there to assist rather than to cause harm. She tried to stand up but just collapsed in agony after saying, I'm okay. The weapon that struck her had slipped her mind. Seeing this, Naruto gently raised her up. He took the weapons off of her body and did the best he could to bandage her. Holding her in his arms, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you." Orihime simply nodded. She felt secure in his arms, as though Ichigo were with her. As Naruto made his way home, she closed her eyes and quickly dozed off. They awaited the pair's contact in the Soul Society. Mayuri watched the screen. Their tracker bags were functioning, but he had lost sight of them after they had left the Senkimon. He located Naneo first after turning on the homing beacon. They discovered her unconscious in the middle of the forest after searching for her on the monitor. Mayuri nodded as Head Captain Yamamoto said, "Get her up." He made the badge ring by pressing a button on the console. With Naneo opened her eyes and looked around after feeling a buzzing sensation on her arm. She looked down to see her badge ringing after hearing a noise close by. When she touched it, a voice could be heard. The captain said, "Lieutenant Eyes, are you there?" She heard a sigh of relief on the other end and answered, "I'm here. We couldn't find you after you left the Senkyomon," so he asked, "What happened?" Naneo murmured, "We were attacked by some men on our way to Konoha, the village Nemu and Isane are." She continued, "We got separated." Mayuri said, "I tried to track her badge." "Okay then." Soul Society. When Mayuri started Orihime's tracking badge, she discovered it lying on the ground close to a building that had been torn down. He panned the camera around, searching for the girl, but all he saw was blood and a decapitated body. As she watched the screen, Hana exclaimed, "Oh no, please let her be safe." "Head Captain," Mayuri said, "what should we do?" After a brief pause, Head Captain Yamamoto responded, "Tell Naneo that she needs to find Orihime Inoue too." He said, "Yes sir," and proceeded to call Naneo. Back with Naneo was on her way to Konoha after reaching the main road. When she arrived at the rest stop, she also noticed the remnants of the battle at the location where her tracking badge was. When she saw the headless body on the ground, she asked herself, "What happened here? Please be safe, Orihime." Mayuri's words, "Lieutenant come in," caught her attention. "Yes, Seapatin," she answered. "You have an update to your mission," he said. "You are to find and located Orihime Inoue as well as the two other lieutenants." She looked around and said, "Yes, Captain. I'll find you, I promise." He had sped up to get back to the village and take Orihime to the hospital because he needed to get home quickly and her bandages were getting soaked in blood. Naruto was walking down the road with Orihime in his arms when he noticed a kunai sucked into a tree. Finally, he drew out a Hiraishin kunai and vanished in a flash of yellow, running inside and appearing before his front door before setting her down on the couch and reaching for the phone in the hopes of getting Tsunade or Sakura to come over and examine her. He was on his way to the phone when he looked up to see Nemu and Isane enter through the front door. "Naruto." They both sobbed and gave him a hug. He greeted them with a hug in return and said, "Hey girls. I just got back but I can't talk, someone hurt and I need to get help." Isane asked, "Where are they?" "As a medic, I can help." Nemu and Isane gasped in surprise when they saw who was on the couch after he said, "She is on the couch." He then walked towards the living room. "Orihime." Both of them exclaimed in astonishment.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.